Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we are now just days away from the Minnesota Vikings facing off with the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday Night Football, and the injury news officially came out today. We'll break all of that down later in the show from the Star Tribune. Andrew Krammer and I go through position by position hardcore breakdowns, and then Stephen Ruiz from The Ringer, who is responsible for their quarterback ranking. Not an easy job over there at The Ringer. Comes along with a lot of feedback, we'll say. But I talked to Stephen about what he saw from JJ McCarthy, what he wants to see, and we talked about some other quarterbacks, including Michael Penix as well. So we'll get into that. I also wanted to just say a huge thank you as we crossed 14,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and I appreciate all of you who have helped grow this channel, the folks who show up every night, ask questions, get involved in the debates, all of you who watch the replays of the shows. Just cannot thank you enough, and those listening on the audio side, you guys are still going strong over there as well. So I appreciate everybody who has made the summer into the fall great for Purple Insider Industries. So let's jump in here, and what I'm going to ask right off the bat is the FanDuel question of the day, which is, I didn't put a lot of work into this one. FanDuel question of the day, JJ McCarthy. Let's talk about his prop, 212.5 yards in this game against the Atlanta Falcons. How many yards do you expect from JJ McCarthy? Give me a stat line. Give me a X for X. How many yards, touchdowns, picks if you want to. If you want to throw in some other prediction as well, would you go over or under 212.5 passing yards? And do you think they win? But we'll get into that, of course, as we go along. My prediction has been that they do, but we'll see. So as far as the injury report goes, Christian Darrisaw will not be playing for the Minnesota Vikings, and I don't have to tell you guys that's not good. Justin Skule struggled against the Chicago Bears, who have a pretty good pass rush, but not a terrifying pass rush by any means. I don't think Atlanta does either. In fact, I was looking at their numbers from last week, just 1 week, but they didn't have anybody on their D-line who graded above a 65 by PFF. It was really their secondary that caused a lot of problems for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this week, you're going to have to see a lot better from Jefferson, a lot better from Thielen. And they do have their full group of tight ends, as Josh Oliver will play in this game. But nonetheless, Justin Skule played like a replacement level tackle, which means there were some plays where he was fine, and then there were some plays where he was beaten very quickly. And if James Pierce goes against him, a first-round draft pick who has lightning quickness, that could cause some problems. I'm sure that Raheem Morris saw on tape the number of times that they were beat on stunts and things like that where he was involved or had quick losses. They're going to want to try to emulate that against the Vikings in this Sunday night's game. And as far as him being listed out versus limited, so Kevin O'Connell explained this to us, why he was limited versus why he is out. And he talked about wanting to get him out there for warm-ups and go through that process, and on the grass in Chicago versus the turf at US Bank Stadium. And I'm going to tell you the truth, I didn't fully understand why he was out versus questionable. I mean, not limited, but questionable at last week. And he had the 2 full practices, and then he went into the game questionable. It didn't happen. This week he had a limited practice and then full practice, and now he is completely out of the game. And I think that with these types of injury recoveries, the ACL, is there are a lot, all the guys who have ever had this have said it's not every single day you get a little bit better. It's not like when you cut your finger while you're, chopping some food or something, and then every day the wound closes up a little bit more. It's not like that with this kind of injury. And O'Connell, talked about just wanting to see him make more progress and be in a good spot, but didn't give a ton of details exactly on when Darrisaw is going to be back. Now, they didn't place him on IR to begin the year. So if they had placed him on IR, then we would have said, well, 4 weeks. So next week does make a lot of sense unless he has a setback. O'Connell said that he did not have a setback. He wanted to clarify that it wasn't like something else went wrong. But we also went through this last year with TJ Hawkinson as a reminder, where Hawkinson was practicing and he's limited in practice, and then he's full in practice, and then is he going to play, and then he's questionable, et cetera, et cetera. And then when he didn't play, I think against, maybe it was Los Angeles, it was like, oh, what the heck, KOC, and he didn't play against the Lions. What the heck? What's going on? I think that this team in general is very hesitant to push guys out there until they're 100% because they see the bigger picture that, yes, they could really use them against the Atlanta Falcons, but where they could really, really, really use them is next week against the Cincinnati Bengals when they bring Trey Hendrickson to town, or in 2 weeks after that when he's facing off with Myles Garrett. You don't want Christian Darrisaw to be struggling in any way or not at 100% or not totally comfortable with whatever and how it's healed and the mobility of it or the strength of it or whatever it might be when you face Myles Garrett, because that will be extremely bad for him. And he is a franchise player. Giving him an extra week, giving him an extra 2 weeks, I know it's important. I know these are big games. I know it's national TV, and you'd prefer not to have Justin School, or if there's any chance that they play Walter Rouse over there, like you don't want that to be the case. But if you're sacrificing this week or another week of having some struggles at the left tackle position, which you can try to paper over and you can try to help out, and your quarterback knows it, so he's more aware of it, that's the best you could do. But they play 17 of these and then some that you're looking for in Minnesota. So you do not want Darrisaw to be struggling. And if some of you saw the Green Bay Packers game last night, I'd like an apology from the people the other day when the Packers traded for Micah Parsons, who told me he's not that good. Nope, he's that good. You're going to need Christian Darrisaw at 100% to go against some of the great rushers that they're going to face this season. If there's any game that you could survive, it's probably these first two where there is not a Trey Hendrickson, a Micah Parsons, a TJ Watt, a Myles Garrett, but those guys are on the way. And I know Watt usually rushes over the other side, but you get the point that those guys are on the way. A lot of talent is on the way against this team, and they need Darrisaw to be ready. So I get it, but it does create a major concern. Now, the good thing on the news, on the injury report for the Vikings regarding the offensive line is that Ryan Kelly is in. So they are not starting a second-year offensive lineman who's never played before on national TV in Michael Juergens. Instead, it will be Ryan Kelly. So he missed 2 days of practice. And this is something that we just need to keep in mind as we go forward here, kind of as always, which is that this team will sit veterans out of practice. And we can't overreact. And I know that we have to go through it and the factors, and we don't really know. But with someone like Ryan Kelly, he doesn't need to practice on a Thursday in order to be good on a Sunday night with whatever he's dealing with, in this instance, a toe. But that's a very big development for them, because playing Michael Juergens, the drop-off there in experience, in raw talent, in where they were drafted, all those things. I mean, you saw it on Monday night. Ryan Kelly created an interior wall that we have not seen there since, I would say, the year that Joe Berger played center was that 2016, where he was really, really on point. But I don't even think Joe Berger was ever as good as Ryan Kelly. You might have to go back to Matt Burke playing the offensive line at that center position to be this good as Ryan Kelly was on Monday. So that's a huge deal that he's going to play in this game. And then you have 4/5 of your offensive line. And, I was noticing today, because I was finishing up my Friday mailbag on the written side, which purpleinsider.football, feel free to subscribe over there. So I was finishing up the mailbag, and one of the questions was, well, why was the offensive line so terrible in this game? And I checked on PFF, and they were the second graded pass blocking unit from that game. And JJ McCarthy registered 6 times that he was pressured out of all of his dropbacks. I think it was 26 total dropbacks, couple of sacks, couple scrambles, and 20 attempts. And that's not very much. That's not getting very much pressure, but 4 of the 6 came from one guy. So if it's from the left tackle, if it's from his backside, if sometimes he was hurried up and scrambled out of the pocket when maybe, as he gets more experience, he could readjust. But I also thought that it just speaks to how hard it is to have a good offensive line in today's NFL, that performance, which was not perfect, still ends up grading extremely, extremely high. It's tough to be an offensive lineman these days, and that's why they spent the draft pick on Donovan Jackson, and that's why they spent the money on Ryan Kelly and Will Fries. So Kelly back, he is healthy, good to go. On the offensive side, also Josh Oliver is good to go as well. He missed a couple of days with an ankle injury, but he is going to be all set. And when they elevated Nick Vannett off of the practice squad, that's where I went, is there an issue with Josh Oliver? Is there concern that Oliver's not going to be up to 100%? Because he is a huge help on the left side of the line to try to just give Justin School a little bit extra assistance there. And then in the run game, we know that Josh Oliver is vital as well. So he's in, doesn't have an injury designation. On the defense, Andrew Van Ginkel is out with a concussion, and Dallas Turner is going to be in. Now, what Kevin O'Connell said today was that every time he's been asked about Dallas Turner this offseason, which I think has been 20 times, he has talked about how excited he is for Dallas Turner and how far he's come in this journey to reach this point. And he mentioned and reiterated what Brian Flores said about Turner yesterday, which was that he was actually disappointed that he wasn't on the field more and that he had felt his presence in that game enough times where they thought he was actually on the field more than he was. And clearly he's going to have a much bigger snap count in this game. What I think would be a little unfair to Dallas Turner with a quarterback that gets rid of the ball so quickly is, well, if he doesn't get 5 pressures and he doesn't get a sack or 2, then Dallas Turner's just a bust and they need to move on and give Chaz Chambliss a chance or something. No offense to Chaz Chambliss, who did a great job making the team as a UDFA, but you get my point. So I don't think that we can treat this as a test case of, is Dallas Turner good or not? We'll find out Sunday night. And as much as I like that stuff, and I really do, about football, I like the marquee element. I like quarterback versus quarterback. When someone says, well, I'm not playing the other quarterback, I'm playing the defense, I'm like, yeah, you're playing the other quarterback. Come on, that's football, man. That's what we do here. We put you guys in the ring and we see what happens. And so I like storylines, but I think it would be a little unfair to Dallas Turner in this game with the way that they play to evaluate him purely on, well, does he get a sack in this game? Does he get 5 pressures in this game? Because of the way Michael Penix plays quarterback. So where I'm looking for him to impact the game is to be in the right places, look like he's winning and at least disrupting the blind side of Michael Penix, because this being a left-handed quarterback, Jonathan Grenard is going to be the one that he sees winning on his side, but this is not their starting right tackle. So this is a backup right tackle. It is a great opportunity for him to have a couple of plays where he impacts the quarterback and wins quickly and shows the flashes. And then what you really want to see is the other technical stuff. Where I thought he was very good the other night was against the run, playing off of the guys up front who did a good job against DeAndre Swift and rallying to the football, using his quickness, making some tackles. Like, he did that on several different plays that stood out to me. Well, this is a game where they want Bijan Robinson to get going. And if you let Bijan Robinson get going, you're going to have a lot of problems. Well, do you think the Falcons want to run at the second-year player who's known as being a little undersized, or do they want to run at Jonathan Grenard, who's one of the best players in the NFL? Now, I think they're going to want to test Dallas Turner quite a bit in the run game. So if he comes out of the game with 2 or 3 pressures and yet also has a really good day setting the edge, it's not going to light anybody's shorts on fire. You're not going to celebrate, well, he was worth the trade up. But it doesn't have to be that way. This is a Dallas Turner, do your job to win this football game, create a couple of disruptions, drop back in coverage and fool Michael Penix. Because one advantage that the Vikings have with edge rushers that can drop back in coverage against a guy like Michael Penix is that he likes to make quick decisions. He likes to get the ball, know where he's going with it based on what he sees, and then let it loose. But the way you could take advantage of guys who get rid of the ball quickly sometimes is to trick them, meaning is to sometimes drop back a defensive lineman into where they're reading from pressure. So, for example, if you're sending a pressure off of Michael Penix's left side, then a lot of times he's going to look for where he can drop in the football behind your rush. So if it's on the right side, let's say you're sending Ivan Pace Jr., but you can drop back Dallas Turner. We've seen him intercept a pass before into that vacated space and try to get a quick decision maker like Penix to make that snap decision and throw it right into the hands of, Dallas Turner. The funniest example that I could think of this happening was when Tom Brady threw an interception to Sam Adams, who was a 360-pound defensive tackle, and then he ran it back for a touchdown. But Tom Brady was like that. Like Tom Brady sometimes would have that happen because he was such a quick decision maker. He would decide, I'm throwing it there, and there might be a fat guy or there might be an edge rusher who drops back into that space. That would be Kurt Warner in the Super Bowl. I think it was James Harrison had read something on that play and they were sending pressure, drop back into that space. That's what I'm looking for here because Penix is going to want to get it out quickly. So again, we might walk out of that game saying, I'm not sure I really saw Dallas Turner get a quarterback hit or, some sort of explosive play, but maybe he's in a spot where he's supposed to be that throws off the quarterback, or maybe he's setting the edge on runs. All that little play-to-play stuff is what I'm going to be looking for, which takes a little more digging at the end of the day. It's hard to watch for in real time. It's much easier to see a sack. But I really learned from Yannick Ngakoue that sacks are just not everything in this life, my friends, when it comes to edge rushers. Yannick Ngakoue had, double-digit sacks. There was all these numbers when they traded for Ngakoue that were like, hey, he's got this many sacks in this many games, and only like 3 other players have done that in the last 10 years, and et cetera, et cetera. You're like, wow, this guy's unbelievable. And then you realize, he doesn't really routinely pressure the quarterback. He kind of sells out for sacks. He doesn't set the edge, doesn't play against the run at all, and is just kind of, trying to swing for maybe the other team makes a big mistake and he gets a sack. Well, that's not really effective play to play. You know who's effective play to play? Andrew Van Ginkel. Every single down, Andrew Van Ginkel impacts the game positively. So if you're playing the role of Andrew Van Ginkel, you got to play it that way. And Van Ginkel doesn't always get 3 sacks. He always doesn't get an interception. Some games he plays really darn well, and he doesn't have anything in the stat sheet. And that's what I'm looking for Turner. So I think we have to be careful about how we grade this game from Turner. I also think it's just another step in the progression for him that is 17 games long of a sample that we're going to see. But on the other side of that, if Turner flashes and if Turner shows the progression that it looks like he's made and that they keep talking about and that we saw sometimes in training camp and we saw the improvements in his body and we saw I thought improvement in the mentality of knowing what he didn't know after that first year and what he had to learn, then I think it will be a very big sign for this defense overall because they need him. They need him to be good. We definitely got to look at some of the weaknesses of this defense in the secondary, as we had talked about, that it wasn't going to be a perfect secondary. If the front 7 is a perfect front 7, that's going to mitigate some of the issues with the back half of the defense, and Dallas Turner's a big part of that, and we'll have to make up for a big absence of Andrew Van Ginkel in this game. So I don't want to make it does Dallas Turner justify his, we could, it would be funny, like to do a big voice kind of this Sunday night, that kind of thing. Dallas Turner proves whether he is a real success in the NFL or a bust. Yeah, but that's not really how we should do it. Now, there's another absence of Jeff Okudah is also out. And while Jeff Okudah only played a handful of snaps in the first game, Still, that's somebody that gave them a nickel package to put on the field. And now they've been talking about Flores and Kevin O'Connell about how Dwight McGlothern, he's going to have to step up to the plate here, and he's going to have to step into this role that he's never played before. Only a handful of snaps last year, 2 training camps, an undrafted free agent that they really, really liked last year, who's been a playmaker for them. And I thought after maybe a bit of an ugly start to training camp, ended up finishing strong. And I also think that that's why he ended up on the roster and not Zemiah Vaughn, even though Vaughn was playing over him for a lot of camp, they gave Vaughn every chance to win the job. That McGlothern, at the end of the day, was the corner that they wanted and has shown a lot of potential. He's never played before, though, but sometimes guys who have never played before step out and show you what they could do, i.e. Miles Price. We said it so many times. Well, he's never caught a real punt out there at Soldier Field, and then when he did, he was awesome. And you're like, oh, well, some guys are good at football. So I don't know what we'll see from Dwight McGlothern. My feeling on this, though, is Jeff Okudah is experienced. He's a physical presence. That's what you really like about him out on the field, is it's not easy to run when Jeff Okudah's out there. But as far as his actual performance over his career in coverage, you're bringing in a potentially replacement level player in McGlothern, but that's what Okudah's been for his career. And you're not filling in like a normal team that plays your regular, just nickel package all the time. And this is a team that's going to rotate different guys. I had a conversation with Jay Ward in the locker room today because he's a guy that you could definitely see being a much bigger player in this game. Also, Harrison Smith is questionable. Without full practices this week, I struggle to see a full-time role for Harrison Smith in the game, but I suppose it is possible that they could have him active and on a pitch count just to get him ramped up. Maybe it's 15 plays or something. I don't think that he'll play, but we'll see. Jay Ward stepped in last week and did a really good job for this team, and he's developed over 3 years. Imagine allowing someone to develop, and then they get on the field and they're not completely lost. Wow, what a concept. But, with Ward, he is following the very same path that we've seen from a lot of other guys. And he has been a special teamer, and he's worked his way up, and he's gotten small opportunities. And now he is a flexible type of player who can play in the slot, can play in, the deep part of the field at safety. And he might be somebody that they need quite a bit in this football game against an Atlanta team that will have both of their top wide receivers in Drake London and Darnell Mooney. Those guys do not have any designation, so both of them are going to be healthy to play in this game. The secondary is going to be tested in this football game, and whether it's McGlothern or it's Ward, someone who's not all that experienced is gonna have to do something in this game in order for the Minnesota Vikings to win. So I want to know how you guys think that this one's going to play out. And around 7 o'clock, going to have Andrew Krammer of the Star Tribune. We had a conversation inside TCO Performance Center before the injury report came out. So we did talk about like some different possibilities, but I don't think it's anything that I need to delete. So that's a really good conversation. But I want to know how you guys think that this game is going to play out. And that FanDuel question of the day, J.J. McCarthy over under 212.5 yards. What do you expect from J.J. McCarthy? Give me one thing that you expect to see from J.J. McCarthy. I'd love your over under there, but it can be just about anything. And I've also got some other fun props if we get to those. But your questions and comments and thoughts are also welcome as well. So what do we got? I think personally for J.J. McCarthy in this game that because of the way that the last one ended, we're going to be talking a lot about, well, he should just do that again, right? He should just be the same exact guy that he was in the fourth quarter throughout the next 4 quarters. And the expectation is set pretty darn high for J.J. McCarthy, the way that he finished that game. But I think that the way that he managed the entire game, because every game is like this, no game almost in the NFL. Now, maybe Indianapolis versus Miami last week, or maybe last year against Houston, but almost no game in the NFL today in 2025 is a team comes out, is just amazing. The other team is like garbage, and then the game ends. On Saturdays, you'll see that. Maybe when the Gophers play Northwestern State, Louisiana Tech or whatever. But that's not the NFL. It doesn't happen very often. And even last night when the Packers beat the tar out of Washington, that was a game late in the game where Washington still very much had a chance and the Packers completely outplayed them. But these are NFL teams, right? So I expect that the Atlanta Falcons will cause problems at times for JJ McCarthy. I expect that they'll score points and that you're not going to just go out there and get a Will Reichard 47-yard field goal and then pack it in because your defense is so good. With the injuries on defense, if Harrison Smith isn't there, Kuda's out, you're adding an extra defensive back to it. You don't have Blake Cashman, and Eric Wilson is a tremendous player. I have huge respect for Eric Wilson, not Blake Cashman. Blake Cashman is a next level top 10-ish type of linebacker who is really good in command out there. I mean, that's some serious losses that they've got going into this game. So I expect that Atlanta will move the ball and that they will score at times, and that during the game, people will be saying, Flores, do you know what you're doing? But that's how it's likely to play out, right? Is there will also be moments on the offensive side that JJ McCarthy does not hit somebody perfectly in stride, that Justin School allows a pressure on a third down that ruins a drive. So maintaining that good decision-making that he started with in Chicago. And I saw Alec Lewis tweet out something from NFL Next Gen about how JJ McCarthy threw in rhythm, which they determined to be between 2.5 and 4 seconds after taking the snap. Maybe a little bit like shoving something into a box, picking it between 2.5 and 4 seconds. But I understand what they're getting at there. Like, it's not a screen that comes out in 1 second, and it's not a scramble. So anything in between. And that McCarthy did that on 65% of his passes, which is a really good number. And KOC quarterbacks are the best in the league when it comes to throwing within 2.5 and 4 seconds, kind of that in rhythm type of passing. Maintaining that, dropping back, making a decision, letting it go, and improving on the timing would be really good for JJ McCarthy. And I think that in the atmosphere that he's going to be in now, he can do that. You are at US Bank Stadium. You are not at Soldier Field in Chicago. They have, your fans have been partying all day preparing for this. And I was at the airport today. Funny story, not that funny. I forgot my headphones. Like I went to bed at 3:00 in the morning after the game and finished all my work, flew back with my flight at 6 and just took off my headphones and set them down when I grabbed my bag and left them there. And the good folks at United Airlines, feel free to sponsor the show. The good folks at United Airlines called me and said, "Did you forget a pair of headphones?" And so I had to go to the airport and I saw one Atlanta Falcon fan. Yep. There was a guy, had Falcons gear on, walking through the airport. I expect that he'll be the only one inside of US Bank Stadium. So the environment is going to be really good for JJ McCarthy in this game. Probably the toughest he'll face is when they say, a quarterback, JJ McCarthy, and everyone will go crazy and then he can't hear the play being called in. Like, if you're at the game, don't do that. Don't cheer. He needs to be hearing the play in that moment. Anyway, other than that, it will be a very good environment for him to communicate, for him to get everybody lined up, to get out of the huddle. This is what you want to see from him. These are the biggest areas. In and out of the huddle's got to be faster. Checks and changes at the line of scrimmage have to be faster. And then decisions have to be ever so slightly faster. And the difference between a slow decision and a fast decision is that. That's it. It's just a half quarter of a millisecond can be the difference. But if you're a little late here or there, that gives a defense an advantage. And I think he was a little late on a couple of his throws in his first game. So you want to see incremental improvements. But if the second quarter they don't score and he goes 1 for 6, We don't have to talk about Christian Ponder. So I'm just throwing that out there. But these are small things you want to see. Now, that's from him. From Justin Jefferson, you want to see him do Justin Jefferson things. You want to see some spectacular catches. You want to see his details be better. You want to see him take over a game the way he has so many times on the brightest stage in front of the Sunday night audience. And I think that Jefferson is, after talking to him yesterday, very, very amped up to do that. And then it comes down to Kevin O'Connell. And what do we want to see from O'Connell? For me, and I talk about this a little later with Andrew and with Steven, but for me, it's just getting a couple of screens. It's a lot of Jordan Mason. Like, make them show that they could stop the run first. Don't give them anything easy. And also, I want to throw this out there as well, that all of us, logically speaking, we can think about this and we could go, it's probably a good idea to just get that ball out of JJ's hands, get some short passes going. I don't mean screens. I mean, quick passes, just get a couple of completions to Hawkinson and, just get him in rhythm early on, right? But this man's best throw is the 15-yard line drive post, 20-yard post. Let him rip it. Let him rip it early. The throw that he said that he got in rhythm with was a deep crossing route from Jalen Naylor that was kind of a little bit of a defense that surprised me a bit, but I guess this is what they mean when they talk about Justin Jefferson, where there were three receivers on the right and Naylor ran a deep crossing route. There's a safety on that other side, but the safety went with Jefferson and not Naylor. That's why he went to Jalen Naylor. It's okay to have JJ McCarthy come out and throw the ball down the field early if those are the best throws that he makes. And I think that they are. I think that touchdown throw to Justin Jefferson or that play action throw, those are the best throws that he makes, is something where he puts his body into it and drives it. That's where he's most comfortable. And he's not yet comfortable, I don't think, with a little dink over there or a little touch pass over there. Those are things that in practice you can come along, and then you go into the game and you kind of are who you are right now until he gets a lot of those. So I'm not saying no short passes. No short passes, KOC, only bombs. Let's go. But more of like leaning into those throws that worked for him in the fourth quarter and into the legs as well. And don't be afraid to use some of that running again and make these other teams prove that they can stop JJ McCarthy. So the FanDuel question of the day, the over under 212.5 yards. I will go with the over on this because I think they're going to need offense. I think they're going to open it up a little bit more, but I would still like them to slam into Atlanta's face with Jordan Mason. And your expectations for JJ McCarthy, what are they? Whether it's numbers, whether it's a score, just win the game, or what is it? Andrew has 27-20. I've got 24-20. I think it's going to be very close. Dino says Dallas Turner is a stud. No player in the NFL would start over Grenard and Ginkel. Well, I think that with what Dallas Turner did last year, had they played him 750 snaps and had him rush the passer every time, he probably doubles his sack output, if not a little more, because he has lightning quickness. He's also probably not a complete player at that point. And developing someone is not a crime. We've seen many NFL players start off in a part-time role and develop and get better and then get their chance and succeed. And that's what you're looking for from Dallas Turner here. And what happened last year is a development season for a very, very talented player. And even though you're right that he would not start over Van Ginkel and Grenard, and there's very few guys who would, because you're talking about a Pro Bowler and a second-team All-Pro, Turner was on the field a lot in the second half of the year, which I think showed his progress, and he was on the field a good amount in this game as well, the first game of the year, and then they played dime and prevent and that sort of thing, and he wasn't out there as much, but he played well and he got on the field. It's not like this guy is sitting on the sideline and they're playing Chaz Chambliss instead. They're playing him. The plan was to play him. They didn't go out and get anybody else. They could have. Instead, they got interior players. And that's where I do think that the interior is going to be huge for them in this game, where you might end up with, I wouldn't be shocked if I saw Jonathan Allen at D end at times, and you had Jalen Redmond and Javon Hargrave in the middle, because you can't play Dallas Turner every single snap. I mean, he's youthful, but he's never played more than about 35. Maybe you could push that to 50, but how are they going to handle, or maybe they will just play him 70. I don't know. How are you going to handle a rotation there? Are you going to have a rotation there? Is it an extra D lineman? Is it playing Jonathan Allen at D end? Is it Bo Richter? Is it Gabe Murphy being elevated? And then, he ends up playing a little bit. I wouldn't be shocked if that ended up happening as well. That's going to be worth watching. Andrew says, wants to see the protection holding up well for JJ McCarthy, more play action runs, JJ, and handles the crowd well. There won't be a whole lot to handle with the crowd if the crowd knows what it's doing. I know they're going to be excited, but they need to study a little Peyton Manning era in Indianapolis, where you just keep your mouth shut when he's on the field. Better protection from the O-line, though, is, I think it's just a one guy thing. In that game, Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, and Will Fries were awesome. It's probably the first time that I would walk out of a game. I mean, I'm sure it's happened before, but not too often, where I said, wow, the interior of the offensive line was really good in that game. Early on, I still don't even want to say they had some problems. Maybe it wasn't the biggest push, but they just didn't have many plays because of a lot of different factors, drops, running routes short, things like that. The interior was really, really good. It's really just that left side that's going to be the biggest question. And more play actions for McCarthy. I wonder how many, and it's nice we can look this up, how many play actions that he ran in the first game of the year. Let's see. He had a lot. Yeah, he had a lot. So when you say more, it's a high amount. He ran 40% of his dropbacks were play actions, which is about 10% more than Sam Darnold had last year, and had some success. 41 yards on 10 dropbacks is not a lot of yardage, but he did have that great throw to Justin Jefferson. It was his one big time throw of the game, as tracked by PFF. That throw to Jefferson was off play action, but I would say keep using it. You don't need to use it every time for him, but keep using it. Name, I guess an anonymous commenter. No pick six this weekend, 3 touchdowns, another W. I don't need the 3 touchdowns, depending on how things end up playing out. But as an offense, scoring at least 3 touchdowns would be in the ballpark of what they're probably going to need to win this game. If Jordan Mason scores them, that goes back to the old Teddy Bridgewater thing. Adrian Peterson scored the touchdowns, so Teddy didn't throw them in. Sorry, that happens sometimes. If JJ McCarthy doesn't throw or run any touchdowns, but Mason does, and they lead touchdown drives, well, all the power to JJ McCarthy then. TLS, but no pick six. Yeah, that would be an improvement. No huge catastrophic mistake is probably a good one. TLS says Jay Ward had another special teams penalty, but Buck said it was Nick McLeod. Well, look, it's not easy to get every single detail right when you're calling 2 teams that you don't cover all the time. Mistakes happen. Jay Ward did leave a little bit early on special teams, and he has had that happen a few times. But defensively, overall as a special teams player, he's been really good over the last 2 years. He just has had a couple of penalties. That one weird one, didn't he line up off sides and it negated a field goal or something, 2023? So a couple memorable ones. JJ to JJ 35-plus yard touchdown. Yeah, that's what you really want to see in this game, is that JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson look like a duo that is going to be dangerous. And with Sam Darnold, those two last year had a couple of big games, and nights like this, like against Indianapolis, where the Colts decided that they were going to play man coverage against Justin Jefferson and just got completely smoked in doing it by Sam Darnold. Hit a couple of shots, hit a couple of intermediate balls for him. I mean, this is the best receiver in the world. He didn't play like it last week, and he should be very motivated to come and play like it this week. Brett says McCarthy over 240 yards. Track Pat has a rushing and passing touchdown, 224, so just barely covering. Melkill says, my gut says the Vikings will whoop them. I think that this Vikings team at full strength, every player on the roster playing, I would agree with you, would be significantly better than Atlanta's overall roster. But without Darrisaw, without Cashman, possibly without Harry, there's a lot of talent that's not playing in this game. And Andrew Van Ginkel, again, like one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL last year. The fact that there are players missing makes it harder because they are kind of big players for them. Paul says, I would bring in Taki Taimani to help stop the run. No doubt they're going to lean heavily on Bijan Robinson. Well, last week they were great against handoffs, 17 for 53. And that's where Jalen Redmond and Levi Drake Rodriguez, I think those guys are better players than Taki Taimani. He's fatter, but I think those guys are better players. And they specialize in that. There were a few plays where those guys shot into the backfield, and that's why they have a more dynamic rotation on this D-line that we saw last week, where you have Levi Drake Rodriguez playing 20 snaps. You have Jalen Redmond playing 30 snaps. That's a deep group, but they all do something a little bit different, where Levi Drake is just very strong and very quick. And I think Redmond is crafty and quick as well. And then, Ty Ingram Dawkins, I think, will mix in from time to time as well. So I don't think that they need anything different from what they did last week. And they should have a much better D-line than the offensive line for the Atlanta Falcons, which last year was the best in the NFL by PFF at run blocking. And I checked this earlier today, but failing on the memory, what is it? 26th for week 1. And it's against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's a good defense. They're a good team. But I think that tells you that they're not the same run blocking unit as they were. TLS says JJ had several balls deflected by pass rushers. I tried to look this up, and I found it with Kirk Cousins, because in 2018, I remember Kirk getting a ton of balls batted down and being like, what is going on with Kirk? Is it something he does? Is he telegraphing where he's going with the ball? Like, why do they keep knocking the ball down? And then he had 12 the next year and 9 and then 9. And it's like, oh, that's not a problem. That's one every other game. I think those knockdowns can be pretty random. You're rolling out, you throw it, the guy just barely gets a hand on it. There was another one where he went to throw the ball, and was it Onyemata kind of came back around and just knocked it out barely at the last second. I don't know if, like, we're going to need a much bigger sample size of him getting balls knocked down. To have 4 knocked down was like shocking. Is that how many he was credited with? I don't know if that's how many he was credited with for the game, but to have as many knocked down as he did was surprising. You just don't see that very much. Could have been just being a little late. Could have been completely random that the ball ends up getting whacked down by somebody. Bobby says, I like McGlothern in there if he's called upon. I'm interested. He's got the talent. He has got the talent. And I'll go back to my friend Chris Trapasso, who I love as a draft analyst. And I remember when they picked up McGlothern as an undrafted free agent, he sent me a message and said, man, I was so wrong on McGlothern. I had a 3rd round grade on him. And then about halfway through camp, I sent him another message and said, I think you were right on him. I think he was more of a 3rd round type of talent. And just like a Gabe Murphy, or just like a number of other undrafted free agents, sometimes guys slip through the cracks, and he was a slip through the cracks type of guy. This isn't somebody who's completely new, undrafted free agent. He's been in the system. The expectation should be high for him. And I only go on what it looks like in front of me and not so much on the draft status. And McGlothern has looked like a guy who could play in the NFL over the last 2 camps. He looks like a guy who could jump in front of a ball and get a pick. How much they're going to let him play is my question, though. Is it going to be Metellus, Jackson, Ward, where Ward is playing back there? Are we going to see Harrison Smith this week? How are they going to manage this? I think Jackson and Ward at the safety positions and Metellus playing nickel is something that they've done and has worked out for them. Mr. Mayer says Elijah Williams is like 8th on the depth chart. He looks promising, but I doubt he gets meaningful snaps. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that he will, but I like where he's at. I really, really like where he's at. And that's a good example right there for Elijah Williams of somebody who will develop, and you want to give him time. Levi Drake Rodriguez last year, that's somebody that everybody wanted to see. Oh, they got to get Levi Drake in there, and he wasn't ready last year. And then now he is, and he's good. This coaching staff seems to understand timelines for guys and when they're ready to do what they need them to do. Jason says kind of hard to let McCarthy throw it deep when your left tackle isn't blocking. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, you have play action plays that are usually downfield. You can roll them away from the left tackle. Justin School did not play well, but he allowed 4 pressures on 20-something, 26 dropbacks total, including scrambles and a couple sacks. But that's 90% of the time still blocking his guy. There's opportunities to still throw the ball, and a lot of downfield passing to someone as fast as Justin Jefferson is 1, 2, 3 hitch throw anyway. So you can do that if you do it right. You can do that. You don't have to hang in the pocket all day. I don't think I'd do it every single play, but I think intermediate is really where I'm looking, where you can get rid of the ball in 3 seconds, where McCarthy can get everything behind it like he likes to, the throws that he's most comfortable with, and then go from there. Name says, take off the last one of the training wheels. My goodness, play calling felt awkward to watch in the first half. It was. Yeah, it was. Because it almost seemed like Kevin O'Connell wasn't really sure how much he could go with there. And execution, it was a massive deal as well. That's the blocking at left tackle and the receivers and some of that stuff. And also there were some plays that were downfield. There's one in particular that was a wide open shot downfield to Jalen Naylor that just never came to fruition because of a pressure off the left side. There was the shot to Aaron Jones that ended up turning into a penalty. So there were some play designs that should have sent JJ McCarthy into the intermediate and downfield areas. That's why it's always difficult to judge the play caller. She's like, these plays, they're not working. They must stink. And I agree philosophically. Running Mason, getting McCarthy into some of his best throws, line drives to the middle of the field. I think they only threw 4 attempts to the middle of the field. That's not good enough for a guy who thrives in the middle of the field. So all that stuff, I agree with you. But then sometimes when you watch the tape back, you go, yep, that play should have worked. But this happened or that happened or the other thing, and that's why it's always a little bit dicey. I shot you 99 as 31-17. Could see that. 50-14, of course. They put up 50, then you're really going to be hearing a lot about JJ McCarthy. Kurt says, injuries early on help us adapt so that later in the year we have even more wrinkles we could throw in. Well, where it might help is you have players who get experience. That's what it is. You have players like Dallas Turner here, like Jay Ward. You probably need everybody. And I've brought this up on the show before, but the Greg Rosenthal theory of 40 players, where his idea was if you want to be a great team that can win the Super Bowl, you got to have 40 good players. And, of course, there's many other things to that, but I like that thought because you're going to miss guys throughout the season. You're going to miss guys in the playoffs, and the next man up has to be at least somewhat ready to face off. And, I think they're going to see some opportunities for some guys here in this game that, like Dwight McGlothern and like Dallas Turner, younger players that are not as experienced. TLS, thank you for the super chat. Says, I've been a Dallas doubter, but I'm optimistic. The thing about being a Dallas doubter is, well, what have we really seen to not take them at their word? We've seen him get in games last year as part of a great defense and contribute. He had a couple of sacks. He had an interception. He had a game against Indianapolis where he had to play Van Ginkel's role that he was very good in. And that's a player who is a 21-year-old developing guy behind some great players. It's not like when he got into those games that he didn't look like Lawrence Taylor. He didn't look like Micah Parsons when he first walked on the field, but he looked like he belonged in the NFL, and he certainly made plays down the stretch for them and was a significant part of the defense. There's nothing that I've seen so far where I would go, oh man, this is a huge problem with Dallas Turner. You got progressively better last year, progressively better throughout camp, and now you expect progressively better in the season. He's got to show it, though. He's got to show it. It's just there hasn't been a lot to work with because of the circumstances, and now we're going to get more to work with. And that's what I'm looking forward to in part in this game. Joe says Redmond and LDR looked pretty good. Will be interesting to see. I don't think that you trade Harrison Phillips unless you're pretty sure about those guys. I don't think you just go, you know what? Let's move on from a captain, veteran player. It's really good and proven because we kind of like this one dude. Those guys were really good in camp, really good in the first game. Bry has the over on the FanDuel question of the day and has 250 to 300 yards passing in the score, 23-20. Would kind of be a little shootout-y, I guess, in that way. Sean says perhaps they elevate Murphy from the practice squad to bridge the snap gap at outside linebacker. I could definitely see that. I think Turner gets 50-ish, Murphy 15, perhaps Bo gets 5. Yeah, it's really, I think, going to show us how they feel about Gabe Murphy because it was a surprise when he was cut out of camp. It was a surprise to me. I figured they could get him through to the practice squad, but it was a surprise to me as much as it was to you guys because I had thought that he had a good preseason and training camp, and sometimes it's just who they think they could get back ends up getting cut and who they think might get picked up. But Murphy played a little bit last year, got into a game. I think it was actually against Atlanta, played okay. They might do that. They might, with Brian Flores, sometimes they like guys that we don't really realize how much they like. The first time I saw Josh Metellus playing box safety in training camp in 2023, I was like, Josh Metellus, huh? Okay. All right, well, that's an interesting idea. And now he's like an 1,000 snap key player, extension, vital guy to this team, right? Sometimes they see things behind the scenes. So it might be somebody else. It might be Bo Richter, who I have been high on kind of since the start and wrote about him last year, just about how good he was on special teams and embracing that role and coming from Air Force and all those things. They might be high on Chaz Chambliss to play him a little bit in that role. He played well in the preseason. So I'm not sure. That's something that you want to start finding out is whether, it was the reason for Gabe Murphy getting cut was because they liked somebody else, or if it was just kind of a procedural thing and he's still a part of this. It's kind of hard to say. Let's see. Kit says under on the passing, over on rushing. Still think JJ and the running backs push the ball on Sunday night. That's where there's nothing wrong with using Jordan Mason like he's Jamal Anderson or Michael Turner or something, where you're pounding away and beating down a defensive line that's just not that impressive. I mean, when you go through the D-line of the Atlanta Falcons, there's not too many names on it where you're going, well, hey, this guy, he's the game wrecker, he's the superstar. You just don't really see that. Barry says, I thought I understood PFF grading, but the Vikings had 30 pressures last week versus 8 for the Bears. They ended up with the same exact pass rush grade. Yeah, so Barry, the quarterback. It's a quarterback. That's what happened there. Did they let me see. I didn't look at the now I'm looking at something different with the grade for the Bears. I see them at 23rd is where I see them on PFF for week 1. I see the Vikings at 2nd and I see the Bears at 23rd for their pass blocking. But also quarterbacks cause pressures and they will give the pressures to the quarterback. How many of those pressures were on Caleb Williams is probably a lot. That's also something I can look up, how many they gave to Caleb Williams, but it had to be a lot, right? With the amount of times that they were chasing him around. Let's see. Yeah, they only gave a couple to Caleb Williams, actually. That's interesting because I thought it would probably have been more, but holding on to the ball. So even if somebody gets beat, holding on to the ball, what was Caleb Williams' time in the pocket in the first week? I'm guessing that was, yep. So Caleb Williams in week 1 had the second slowest time from snap to throw, which would probably cause his offensive line to have a bigger challenge. And JJ McCarthy, I think, was pretty good in that area. Where was McCarthy? I think he was pretty good in that area anyway. I'm not seeing it right away. Oh, there he is. McCarthy was at 2.8 seconds versus 3.4 seconds for Caleb Williams. You're just going to end up with more pressures there. Let's see. Derek says, I would love to see a first drive that would show KOC isn't afraid of hitting the gas and not putting JJ in bubble wrap. Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, sometimes even with it doesn't have to be bombs. It doesn't have to be 50-yard shot plays. Sometimes it's just a play action that goes for 15 and then a straight drop back where everybody's all out and you swing pass for another 10. And then you hit Jefferson on a hook or a whatever, button hook, they used to call it. I don't know if they still do. Or curl. And you hit him for 15 or 12, or it's a drive that feels like the other team just got hit by a truck is something that's happened a lot during the KOC era with Kirk Cousins or with Sam Darnold, where they come right out and they drive down the field and they score right away. We've just seen it a lot. And for last week, in those scripted plays to look so bad, they either had a little bit of a rough script that maybe wasn't quite clear for JJ McCarthy or didn't have the right idea, or McCarthy was pretty anxious and so were a lot of other people. Maybe that could be a combination of things, but I don't disagree though. You'd like to see aggressiveness, but don't forget about Jordan Mason. It's a little bit of don't get too hot or too cold. Because if you're all aggressiveness trying to throw it down the field, then you forget about Mason, which they kind of did until the third quarter, and you don't want to do that either. Bobby says Miles Price should start us around the 50-yard line for every punt return. Yeah, Miles Price made one hell of a first impression. It's hard to do that every single week, but at least he struck the fear. I saw, I think it was D'Orlando Ledbetter, who's a longtime Falcons reporter, was tweeting about how the special teams coordinator was talking about Miles Price down there in Atlanta today. I mean, they're noticing that he is a factor and they're going to have to pay attention to Miles Price. Let's see. Evan says, so excited to watch Miles Price play again. That's the first time in a long time that anybody's said that about a punt returner, but he's got something to him. He has some juice to him that is special. It's unique, and it doesn't take any work for any of us to see it. I mean, when he's out there for the preseason games and then he's out there, it's just an explosiveness. It's a fearlessness. And I think he's got strength too to run through people if he has to. We saw that in the preseason game. He's an exciting player. And that's one of those things where I don't want to get into any draft discussion, but where if you're going to be a good team, this has always been my thought. You have to have random guys that you never expect emerge. I will say that for any sport. You have to have, it's so hard to just in an off season throw together all these people who are highly paid free agents, which the Vikings have done and spent a lot of cash in order to get there. But every team that's good needs a random undrafted free agent to be a great punt returner and then suddenly get some huge returns in the first game and be a hero and go, where did that come from? I mean, that was Marcus Sherels too. Undrafted free agent. How many times did Sherels come up big for them? It's the same kind of thing with Miles Price. They need that. Neil says, want the Vikings team that blows a team out. So my blood pressure isn't 140 over 200. I don't know how blood pressure analytics work, but that sounds bad. This year, I don't know if you're going to see a lot of blowouts. When you look at the schedule, when you look at the NFC, just a lot of teams that are pretty good. I'm not looking at the NFC like I looked at it last year. And this is why when we look at record and expectation, we have to do it differently every year. And a lot of it has to be on the environment. Because last year, there were so many god-awful abomination teams in the NFL. If I'm not mistaken, it was one of the biggest gaps between the number of good teams, number of bad teams. Like the number of teams under 6 wins, the number of teams over 13 wins that the NFL has ever had. The have and have-nots, it was absurd. And the Vikings got a lot of the have-nots on their schedule. They don't this year, and that means probably closer games than they had with some of their blowouts. And some games were blowouts and turned into one-score games. We know that. But the schedule is different this year. The environment's different. So I think what you should do is take a deep breath during a game. And sometimes I want to say, remember, and I know this is hard, but you are just watching football. You are just watching football. That is a hard thing to remember during a game. I understand that. Let it play out. If they're down after one quarter, let it play out first. Get angry after the game if it doesn't go your way. Rob says school wasn't great, but he wasn't egregiously bad either. JJ slipped on the turf trying to escape a couple times. That is true. That he also got arm tackled once, where if he kind of breaks through it or doesn't trip on somebody's arm that got thrown out, he probably gets about 10 yards. School overall graded, I think, a 60 by PFF, which, to put that in context, the worst games from TJ Clemmings were somewhere between 20 and 40, and Christian Darrisaw games are usually in the upper 70s to upper 80s. So that gives you kind of the spectrum of where that is. 60 is considered by PFF. A 60 grade is replacement level play. That's what Justin School gave. He gave replacement level play, but it's still not a position that you can really get away with very well having replacement level play. Now, if they would have begged for replacement level play at the guard position at times, I think that tight end or running back or a safety, you can get away with that on a number of games. Left tackle's hard because you're usually playing the best athlete on the other team. Nick just got here. Was Kelly practicing? He was, and he does not have a designation. That is huge for them to not have a designation for him, which means he's playing. He's good to go, all set. So there you go. Expose. Notice JJ was staring receivers down. Is that an issue you saw? That one is hard to figure, because if he was getting into his reads early in the progression, well, you're probably going to go where you're looking. I don't know about the staring receivers. I mean, maybe he was. It's hard to figure out. Even when you're watching the tape, you're looking at, is his helmet pointed that way? Then I guess he must have been looking that way because his helmet's like this, but I don't know what his eyeballs were doing. I'm going to say generally, yes, it sort of looked like he was looking in the direction of where he was throwing. One step at a time with McCarthy. He got the fourth quarter comeback. He's not prime Tom Brady just yet, with where the game is slowed down and he's looking off wide receivers. And that's why they need to manage it carefully with what they dial up for him. But when he ultimately threw the football, I thought that he did a good job of deciding where. There may be something to what you're saying, though, as far as defenders having a read on it of when he is going to, when and where he's going to throw the football, of him staring down his wide receivers. It's just a really hard thing, a very advanced thing, to be dropping back and using your eyes to manipulate safeties and stuff. And this is why it's going to have to be one step at a time. And that's why FanDuel question of the day, I still think he'll be around 200 yards in this game, that I would probably go the under, and they're going to run a lot and try to control the ball and play it that way and try to hit on some of those plays that work best for him. But that's why you can't just throw 40 times a game right off the bat with JJ McCarthy, because there is some elements of that. Mr. Mayor says, weird hearing different podcasters talk about the beginning of week one. Some people are saying the training wheels were on and they let him loose with the full playbook. And others say they started too complex and that he got successful when they simplified it. What's your take on that? My take on that is that probably the guy who knows best the answer to that is Kevin O'Connell. I felt like they were a little bit timid coming out with JJ McCarthy, and it certainly didn't strike me as being super aggressive right away with the routes that they ran. When I watched back on tape, I also think there were some downfield routes that the opportunities were missed, and he ended up scrambling or throwing somewhere else and incompleting a pass. I don't think that a war crime was committed of play calling here by Kevin O'Connell to start the game. I think that everybody was responsible in different ways, whether it was some play calls that weren't good enough for McCarthy or good at that time. How about the run calls early in the game? They didn't have any success with that. And Wes Phillips said that they were too slow to make those changes and get to some of the more power runs that the Bears were giving them. And so that was an issue. Not having Jordan Mason until the third drive. Jordan Mason should be the last person I want running into me to start my day is Jordan Mason. Aaron Jones, I get if the starter is a thing, I don't care about who's starting. What I would want is, as far as like in the box score or in the introductions or whatever, what I would not want if I was a defensive lineman, a linebacker, a safety, would be to have to fill a gap and get drilled in the face by Jordan Mason to start my day. I've just had the introductions. I've just had my eggs and bacon. I'm ready to go play some football. And I'm lining up at linebacker and Jordan Mason hits me in the mouth. Like, that's not something that I would love. And that's why I would like to see him early on in the football game. So everybody had their reasons why, it didn't work out. And, I think that those are all things that they can work on. I mean, that's the one thing, is that there was nothing that I saw in that game and the way that they started, as bad as it was. When I looked back over it, there was nothing that I saw where I went, oh my gosh, this team is in so much trouble. This is such a problem. Nothing that I saw. It was just, that should be better. That should be better. That should be better. Now, Justin School, of course, there's no answer to that one. But, those things, when it comes to, the wrong routes or play calls that weren't there for him yet, or not using Jordan Mason early on, like all those things, those are all things that they can improve on for this week. That was the most encouraging part of the start of the game. Now, when something goes bad, we open an investigation, and sometimes the simplest answer is the best one, which is they just didn't execute what they were supposed to do. Dylan says Dallas played stout last week and broke through to disrupt the run game on a couple of important times. I agree, Dylan. I agree. It was really noticeable, the times, and you saw the acceleration, you saw the power, and went, oh, Dallas Turner. That was a good play, right? And even though it was only a couple of pressures, it still was impacting the game, which is, that's the job. I thought he had a good last week. I really thought he had a good last week. Mr. Mayor, why was the field so rough in Chicago? Oh, Mr. Mayor, I have no idea. They had concerts, and it's Chicago. It's never been good. I'm sure if you're Justin Jefferson, when you watch the tape back, there's a couple of very clear slips and slides. It's football, man. No excuses. I don't know. Chicago. What are you going to do? It's Chicago. Bobby says Jordan Mason, most impacting acquisition. I might go Javon Hargrave as well. I'm writing about Javon Hargrave for this week. Might go with Javon as well, because he was a beast last week. But I agree. What they added, last year, O'Connell was talking about play style all the time. Play style. We got to be tougher. We got to be a play style team. And they got to feel us, kind of thing. You know what that comes down to, though? That doesn't come down to asking for it. I can ask for it all day long. You could stand next to me on a basketball court and, be like, you know what we need? We need dunks. I'd be like, okay, here I go. And I would come 2 feet short of the goal of dunking the basketball, because I can't do it. I can shoot for 3, but I can't dunk. Last year, you were asking Dalton Reisner to have an intimidating play style. Not going to happen, my friends. You're asking Garrett Bradbury to intimidate the other team and have a play style. Not going to happen. Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, Javon Hargrave, Jordan Mason. Now you've got something. Like, that's only as good as the players you have. And they have a lot more of that now, which I think should bode well for Sunday night. Jax Parks says, never felt as good watching a Vikings win as I did Monday night. Borderline euphoria. JJ has the quarterback traits needed to win a Super Bowl. Going to be a great ride with this guy. Well, this is the thing from my seat that's a little bit challenging. Everything you saw, I'm not going to tell you that it wasn't really good. It was. The way he executed the offense, the plays that he made, the scramble with his legs, those were things where I was, searching my old podcasts. How many times did I say, if only they had a quarterback who could just make a play with his legs? And there it was. And the throw into the end zone was an anticipation throw to Jefferson that was good, led him to the right spot. So there was a lot to like. There's a lot to like from his personality, all that sort of stuff. But like talking about the Super Bowl right now, let's let him start 2 games. That's where I'm at. Like you deserve all the excitement of last weekend. Good thing you didn't turn the game off in anger or something. But there's going to be game 2 that he's going to play, and we'll see how that goes before we quite get there. They have a team good enough to very seriously compete. And as I was watching the Packers, and I know you guys don't want me to talk about that game, I'm sure, but as I was watching the Packers last night and how good and mature that team is and how filthy that defense was, I was thinking, man, that drive down to Lambeau, I'm going to be hitting the gas a little bit harder. Like, this is exciting to see these 2 teams play against each other at some point with how strong the rosters are. And I wonder where McCarthy will be at that point when they play what looks like the best team in the NFC, and they've got a few weeks to figure it out first. And that, to me, is the thing to watch with McCarthy. And I know you guys, it's exciting, so you want to get ahead of yourselves, and I'm not going to tell you not to. From where I'm sitting, from my perspective, it's, well, let's see the incremental improvements week to week of doing the things that didn't go well better and continuing to do the things that went well for JJ McCarthy, and then see where this team is at, because the potential is that he'll be very good. DL, did you see the ESPN ranks? JJ went from 29th to 32nd. Laughable. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what are you going to do? Later on in the show tonight, I have Steven Ruiz on where we talk, and he's a quarterback ranker himself at ESPN, and we talk about that and everything else. And it's a hard gig to rank quarterbacks, but I mean, ranking JJ McCarthy at the back end of the NFL after that's pretty silly. That's pretty silly. And I hope that you guys saw Kevin Cole, and sometimes you could just do better with a search of the internet. Kevin Cole, I would highly suggest, is an analytics expert and does good writing. He pointed out that JJ McCarthy, in terms of expected points added, which is, a pretty well-established statistic of giving you a good idea of how someone played. It's not perfect. Nothing is, but how efficient you were. EPA should tell you pretty well that if you adjusted the EPA for the drops, he lost the 3rd most EPA just on drops, and that he would have been 12th. So this is why quarterbacks are so interesting, right? Is that everybody sees a different picture, and I guess they must be doing a quarterback ranking thing to kind of stir the interwebs, and that's good for them. Kevin's Outdoor Buzz says Vikings defensive backs are the biggest issue. So many Bears wide receivers had too much separation. Fortunate that Caleb was inaccurate. And thank you so much for the super chat, Kevin's Outdoor Buzz. And you are 100% right. And going into this game, that's the biggest concern for me. I don't know that they could dominate the run game without their offensive line that they had last year, but I sure know that Michael Penix can throw some big-time balls if he gets any separation. He probably won't miss the way Caleb Williams did, and the fact that they have Drake London and Darnell Mooney healthy, that gives him a whole bevy of weapons to work with. That is for sure a concern, and that's why I would say, I don't think the Vikings just steamroll Michael Penix in this offense. Dino says on the sideline, McCarthy said, Jefferson, don't lose faith on me or in me. That was awesome. That's who JJ is, man. That's why you draft him and I know I've said that a lot, but that game, that's why you draft him, because all that stuff's real, character, leadership, work ethic, resiliency, it's all real. In fact, it probably correlates better to success than arm strength. Not that arm strength's not nice to have, but that's the stuff. You got to buy into the person. And I think that's what KOC saw in both of these quarterbacks. But McCarthy being the one that they picked. Wallpapers Live says, with Okuda out, do you blitz more or less to compensate? It's a great question. Because if you blitz and Penix does the same thing that he did to the Bucks last week, which was on blitzes, he went 9 for 13 with a touchdown. He was great. on blitzes. I think it was 9 yards an attempt on blitzes. Then, he might just light you up. You also might get him because it's the US Bank Stadium and it's going to be really hard to communicate. He was at home last week. It's a lot easier. If you rush 4, then he gets a little more time to sit in the pocket and pick you apart and throw into windows. That's a really big storyline in this game, is how Brian Flores is going to approach it. For me, I would blitz early and just see. You could get a good look. Is he identifying what we're throwing at him? And then if he does, you back off. They did this last week. Last week is the opposite. They did not blitz early, and it was working for Chicago. So they said, screw it, we're going to blitz. And then Caleb Williams went, I think, 5 for 15 on the blitzes the rest of the game. So you can sort of find out. But the defensive backs are still a major concern here. Without Harrison Smith, if he can't play, he is questionable for the game. You've got your starting corners. They both looked shaky last week. I don't expect them to. They have better histories than that, but they were shaky. And then you're without another corner. It is Jeff Okudah, but you are without another corner. That could be problematic. Jim says Penix won't escape like Caleb, cover the quick game and 7+ sacks. You're going to have to Google Michael Penix, Jim. Now I can see him getting sacked a couple times against this team. This guy just doesn't take sacks. He doesn't, this is the thing. He also doesn't rely on the quick game. Like, he relies on his anticipation and his arm to throw into windows where he's not holding on the ball forever. He was top 5 in not holding on to the ball, and they rushed him and they got some pressure on him. He's just really darn good at it. He's a good quarterback. He's got a lot of talent. And, last year he showed it. He's a first-round pick. He's a guy that and you know what I mean when I say this, like, they embarrassed themselves to pick because of the whole Kirk thing. And, last year, I'm going to see, how many sacks did he have last year? Let's see. He had 4. So, yeah, that's Penix. He had no sacks this week, and in 5 games last year, he had 4 times sacked. That's it. This is not a guy you're getting 7 sacks against. He is really good at managing the pocket, and that's why it's such a good battle. John says Donovan Jackson looked like a future All-Pro. So we've got the Super Bowl from J.J. McCarthy. We've got the All-Pro from... No, look, Jackson looked great. He looked great. And the one thing I've learned about Donovan Jackson is that he is a sharp dude. He is a smart kid. I've talked to him a few times, talked to him right after the game, talked to him for my Javon Hargrave piece that's coming out tomorrow. He's a sharp kid. And he's got the athletic ability. You add that together with high IQ and playing next to veterans. Look, it's one game. That one looks pretty good. And guards, to me, now are worth their weight in gold. They're hard to find. Centers and guards, they're just hard to find. There's not that many good ones in the league. If you have one who can move the needle, you've really got something there. That's why positional value is always something that's shifting. You should never just decide, well, yeah, guards, they're just not worth it, because 5 years from now, the defenses could play different and suddenly guards are worth it. And that's what's really happened. And that's why I advocated it. On draft night, a lot of, it's a guard, who cares? There's some of that. Nah, I shouldn't say everybody. This fan base has been abused by guards. So maybe there was happiness amongst the fans. But I looked into it last year. Playing guard has gotten harder in the NFL significantly. They're allowing a lot more pressures than they were because they're getting attacked more. That defenses understand you can't just rush 4 and you have to attack the interior, and they've done a great job at that. So that means guards are more valuable. If Donovan is as good as he was consistently, you've really got some value there. Joe, with Chandler out, who else is there to kick return? Xavier Scott or Ty Felton is going to be the other guy. So still, unproven guys back there. Miles Price is really the dude, but Felton and Scott were the guys that Matt Daniels brought up. Bobby says, how long before Mason takes the number 1 spot? He's on pace for more yardage. Well, on pace for 1 game. I think that there should be no such thing. I think it should be a 50-50 split. Let's not forget Aaron Jones ran down the sideline and caught a 30-yard touchdown. I don't know of any other running backs who did that in week 1. I don't want Aaron Jones off the field. I just want Jordan Mason at the beginning of the game. And if it's working, then you stick with him. You just go with what's working and you rotate them. I think they need to rotate them in series, not just only, okay, it's the third drive. Now, Mason, you're in. It should be, well, hey, we need somebody to ground and pound, throw out Mason, then mix and match with your tendencies, stuff like that. I think there's more that they could be doing there. We'll see whether it's Xavier Scott or Ty Felton. Both of those guys worked in training camp for the returner spot. Julian, going back to the FanDuel question of the day, I think McCarthy will have like 265 yards passing. That probably means if he's getting up toward 300, it's hard to get up toward 300 these days with the way defenses are playing. But if he gets up toward 300, then this game's probably a pretty entertaining back and forth. Rob says, thought Ty Felton had a great day on special teams, beating his coverage. You're totally right. Felton has got something there. Felton's got something there. This is why, Felton, you're right. Like he's got juice on those, on the punt gunning, kind of like Sherfield had last year. And this is why I always am banging this drum. Let the guy, during training camp. Well, why isn't Felton wide receiver 3 yet? And that sort of thing. Like, he can play football. If you can do that punt gunning thing, you can play in the NFL. You could play football. So he could be a valuable contributor to this team. I think he definitely could be. Probably a good time to jump to the interview with Andrew Krammer. Just looking at some more comments here. But we had a really good conversation breaking down the hardcore of this team, these two teams battling against each other, the X's and O's. Thank you, Matt, to the kind words about enjoying the show. I really appreciate that. Do I think that Walter Rouse has a chance to play? He does, but I also don't think that school was so bad that they would be saying, let's play someone who's never played before. And this is going to be quite the atmosphere, national TV. Are you going to and then maybe that doesn't matter. I don't know. We saw Miles Price do the job. Rouse, you might need him, but I don't know. It feels like they're going to go with the person that they trust the most, which is Justin School. And as much as he did struggle last week, we should keep in mind that last year with Tampa Bay, he had one really bad game against Detroit and Aiden Hutchinson, I think, and he was mostly okay. He was not that bad as a player last year. So there's a chance that it was matchup based or defense based or whatever it might be. I think that they will end up keeping Justin School there. Rach says, thought you weren't a fan of quarterback rankings. Well, you are correct about that. I am generally not, but Stephen Ruiz from The Ringer is a friend of mine, puts a lot of work into his quarterback rankings, and I think that they drive everybody nuts like anybody's quarterback rankings do, and it's part of the job, but he's very detailed in his analysis of the quarterbacks. And I think the rankings sometimes are just sort of a vehicle to talk about what the quarterbacks are doing in the NFL these days. And if you just if your article was, I talk about what the quarterbacks did this week in the league, not as catchy as quarterback rankings. So I get it. Like, it's a clicks world. But Steven does a good job, and I've known him for a long time, and I think he's got really good observations. So you're going to hear from him a little bit later in the show about his rankings and what he thought of JJ McCarthy and stuff. But am I not a fan of rankings? No, you're right. I'm not. Because I just don't think they tell the right story. I don't think it's a standard deviation issue. The first and second and third and fourth best quarterbacks in this league are so much better than the fifth, sixth, and seventh. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow are so much better than anyone else that whoever gets ranked fifth, maybe it's Herbert, I don't know. Whoever you rank fifth is not close to those guys. And then the sixth best quarterback or seventh may be worlds better than the next guy, or he might be almost exactly the same. And not only that, my main issue is that supporting casts are not factored into this, and that's how the real game works. So I wrote an article about this actually when Jalen Hurts went to the Super Bowl in 2022. I wrote, if you're ranking quarterbacks, you have to rank Jalen Hurts toward the top of the league. Or was it 23? Sorry, no, 22. Yeah, 22. You have to rank him toward the top of the league. He's going to have one of the best seasons in the league. He's got an unbelievable supporting cast. He's going to be good. And yet I would open quarterback rankings and he's 23rd. He's not going to be 23rd, guys. He's got A.J. Brown. He's got Devontae Smith. He's got Dallas Goedert. He's got the best line in the league. Well, he's not going to be 23rd. And it's the same thing with McCarthy. Guys, he's not going to be 32nd. I freaking promise you. I absolutely promise you, at the end of the year, with Jefferson, Addison coming back, this line, this coach, he will not be the worst quarterback in the National Football League. I promise. So why are you putting him at the bottom of your rankings? It doesn't make much sense to me, as all Vikings quarterbacks just succeed. But they did the same thing with Darnold. It was like they put Darnold, he's 28th, 7th tier quarterback, doesn't deserve to even touch a football. Like, do you understand what, Nick Mullins did with Jefferson? Do you get, like, supporting cast has to be factored into QB rankings. But then if you do that, then you'll get a lot of, well, how dare you? This quarterback's raw. It's crazy sometimes. It's just crazy. So anyway, there's that rant for you. But you're right. In general, that's my issue. Okay, so why don't we jump to the conversation, and thanks so much, TLS, again for another super chat. Why don't we jump to the conversation with Andrew Krammer? So this, again, just to update you, was on Thursday afternoon. We weren't sure yet 100% who was going to be playing, who was not. So we worked with that of different factors, but still a hardcore breakdown of the matchups between the Vikings and Falcons with the Star Tribune's Andrew Krammer. Actually, hold on. I need to make sure I don't forget about our sponsors before I do this. I always do this. I get focused. So hang on 1 second for Andrew Krammer. This episode of the show is brought to you by my good friend Denisa Tova and her team at TOVA, QDRO, and Retirement Valuators, which might sound complicated to you, but the best part about Denisa is she has a podcast that breaks down the law in a very personal way with those who are involved in doing it. So judges, juries, lawyers, all of it sounds very black and white, very harsh, and yet these are real people who are doing those jobs, and they have stories and they have skills and they have perspectives that Denisa ties in on her Beyond the Bar podcast. So you're going to want to check it out. She's interviewed all sorts of different folks that are in different parts of the law. How do lawyers and mediators balance their emotions with the truth? How's AI changing the legal world? And how the law is a lot like skiing, I saw was one of her episodes. And I also was on one as well. So the Beyond the Bar podcast, you're going to want to check that out. And Off the Mic, Denisa runs a forensic retirement lab. So if you are a divorce lawyer and your client's 401k or IRA was around before the marriage and it's all blended together, well, let her help you out with her settlement language lab. Just go to LinkedIn, find Denisa Tova, Tova, ask her about the settlement lab, and let her know that you heard of the show here on Purple Insider. Okay, now, Andrew Krammer. Welcome, everybody, into TCO Performance Center. Matthew Coller here, along with Andrew Krammer of the Minnesota Star Tribune for our weekly hardcore breakdown. Vikings, Falcons, national television, 2024 quarterback narratives, etc., etc. So Vikings, Falcons, Andrew, we saw this matchup last year, but it looked very different because Kirk Cousins was the quarterback. So instead of revenge game, now it's, hey, you guys were drafted in the same year game. And that is a fact. So we're going to go through the best matchups between the Vikings and the Falcons. Yeah. And I think the best place to start with this conversation is probably how JJ McCarthy and the offense match up against this Falcons defense. What have you taken away from the last 2 days of Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips talking about the reflective on JJ McCarthy's game, what happened early in the game? The pick six was talked about today, how he came back in the fourth, how he handled himself, all of that.
Yeah, I think what stood out to me is how they've talked about pointing the finger at other people, the other 10 guys in the huddle, saying that at the start of that game, other guys were just not on their responsibilities. We heard their offensive coordinator, Wes Phillips, tell us just now that great offenses usually don't take turns messing up. Great offenses usually are on top of things and understand what they need to do. And the Vikings just showed, whether it was Brian O'Neill seemingly missing a block on the opening run play, or Justin School giving up pressure early, drops in that game, guys slipping on the field, whatever the excuse may be, they weren't all executing around McCarthy as much. But at the same time, McCarthy looked overwhelmed at times in the noise with the operation, shouting out the changes, canning plays. He seemed like a guy who very much was settling into what he needed to do and really, spinning many, many plates at once. So I think this will get better. The Vikings coaches say it's going to get better in terms of being at home, not dealing with the noise, and just getting those first game jitters out of the way. This guy had not played a meaningful game in 600 plus days. So I think that's what it looked like. That's what it looked like to the coaches. And they're expecting the operation to be smoother and not have, for instance, the 2 delay of game penalties they had in the first half.
Kevin O'Connell is known as a pretty nice guy. And with us, our interactions with him on a weekly basis are really friendly, even when things are tense or things are difficult. I think he keeps pretty calm and cool, unlike maybe some other coaches we've covered in the past. But I'm guessing that some of the paint came off the walls with the film session for the beginning of the game with some of the details, whether it was routes that looked like they weren't run very well or blocking assignments that weren't run very well. But I also think with J.J. McCarthy that maybe there was no way to anticipate what it's really like to be out there at Soldier Field in that situation. And this week is just going to be very, very different. He's played twice now at US Bank Stadium, which does matter to some extent. And also, everyone will hear everything he says at US Bank Stadium. And what I don't expect, and what would be concerning if we saw it again, was the play clock going 3, 2, and you're scrambling around. But I also do want to remember that last year there was a point where Justin Jefferson went to Kevin O'Connell because they were having this problem with delay of games. Yeah. And he said, can we just line up and run our routes? And I do wonder about that with J.J. McCarthy, if there is so much on his plate. And we've heard this staff say this before, even when Josh Dobbs was here, and Wes Phillips said it again. We have to give them everything that they need or they won't be able to do their job at their maximum. But I do think that cup does floweth over sometimes with what Kevin O'Connell asks his quarterbacks to do. And that's what I thought. The first 3 plays of a game, there's no way you should be running around trying to get people lined up, trying to make checks. It should just be walk up to the line of scrimmage, take the snap, hand it off, run a play action, whatever it is. And I know football is more complicated than that, but I thought if you guys knew what this atmosphere was going to be, why did you have him have checks and changes and everything else in the first 2 or 3 plays of the game?
Yeah, I thought there was some bad analysis from some smart people online who were saying things like, oh, the Vikings are running this vanilla offense, that's why it's struggling and all that. Dennis Allen just knows what they're doing. Well, no, we just heard Wes Phillips talk about it. We saw it with our own eyes. They did not dumb it down that much for him. They tried to give him the tools to work with. And I'm talking to Josh McCown this summer. He talked about how we have to treat this kid like he's a child who cannot yet walk, but we have to coach him as if he knows how to. So we have to give him the tools, empower him to get to that point where he feels like he's walking and then eventually running. But we know he's not there yet. So I do think there's that give and take where maybe they pulled back on some of the responsibilities or some of the multiple plays they were giving him at the huddle, because it didn't seem like those issues continued throughout the game. It seemed like, too, they went into more no huddle eventually, picked up the up-tempo, tried to use that as a weapon to help simplify things and simplify the defense they were facing.
So I don't expect the game against the Falcons will just all look like the fourth quarter. Otherwise, they're going to score 80, carry the 84 points?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
I don't math, I football.
It'd be a lot. Yeah. It would be really the best offensive game in history if you just scored 3 touchdowns every single quarter. So I don't expect that. But what should we expect them to take away from what they did in the fourth quarter that worked so well against Chicago into this game against Atlanta?
Well, boy, if Miles Price can start them in midfield every time, that would be helpful as well. It would also be helpful if they could lean on the run game. If Jordan Mason continued to be as efficient as he was in especially that fourth quarter, that last drive, I was impressed not only by Mason and the run game, but Kevin O'Connell sticking with it. They spent 4.5 minutes to score that last touchdown, and that was a crucial time wasting to help kind of choke out Chicago's chances there. And that's coaching. That's a change in coaching that we haven't seen from O'Connell. So I think they need to stick with the run game. I think they need to do that early in games as well. Maybe start a drive or two with a couple runs and see what happens. I also wouldn't be shocked, Matt. Would you be shocked to see Jordan Mason start a game soon? I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if we start seeing him get more involved, because his first carry did not come until the third drive on Monday night.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that. And what I would like to see is, and maybe this operation is more challenging than I think it is, but what I'd like to see is our drive starts with a screen pass to Aaron Jones. Feel free to use them, the screens, a little bit more. But let's just say it starts with a screen pass to Jones, and he gains 15 yards. Okay, now here comes Jordan Mason, and then it's a handoff to Mason. It seems like it's your drive, my drive, your drive, my drive, when I think that they should be able to mix and match with these guys and have them as both part of drives. I also think that this should be treated kind of like we saw, and this is going back a little bit, but Jerick McKinnon and Latavius Murray, where it was basically, if you're having a good day, you keep going. If you're having a good day, you keep going. If Aaron Jones ends up in a game with 3 carries, okay, fine. If Jordan Mason's rolling, if Mason ends up with 3 carries because Jones is rolling, then just go with whoever has the better vision on the defense, whoever is hotter. But, there is something about Jordan Mason that makes me think, I don't know how often this guy's going to slump, because he got hit 2 yards from the line of scrimmage and got 6. He got hit at the line of scrimmage and got 4. Someone tried to arm tackle him and had their arm ripped off and flew into the stands. I mean, the violence and the strength that this guy runs with, I don't think he's very easy to ever slump. And even when you have bad runs, you're probably still going to have pretty good runs.
Yeah, and there was one run I thought of Aaron Jones early in that game where he just, at least early, didn't seem to be making some smart decisions in the zone games, where there was one run that went toward Will Fry's side, the strength of their offensive line on that night, and he bounces it back to the left where Justin School's getting pushed back into him, and even though he had vision to bounce it outside and just didn't. I think Mason's so decisive and different in that aspect, where Jones seems to understand that his strength is speed and outrunning people and getting the edge. So he's looking for that consistently, whereas Mason just knows, there is no man that's going to really throw me down here at this point, like Miles Price, who got kind of made fun of by the head coach for getting chucked 9 yards. But Mason's chucking those people 9, 10 yards. And I think that is something this offense specifically needs, because they not only spent to upgrade the interior line to bulldoze people, they needed a guy like Mason to come in here and do that, because Jones just doesn't do it.
Well, and I think it was Wes Phillips said today about feeling the size of the interior offensive line. And for so long, it's been undersized center who, if you're playing the wrong person, is going to get worked. I've also, watching the tape back in the second half, felt the size when they ran some sort of double team. I don't know every single run scheme, exactly to a T, but it was a double team between Ryan Kelly and Donovan Jackson, and they just took the nose tackle and eliminated him. He was moved 5-6 yards down the field with those two guys' size and athleticism. The strength of Ryan Kelly was just on display. I mean, when they were running stunts and someone would come flying into Ryan Kelly and then just hit a brick wall, like, he is so impressive. And run behind those guys. Like, feel free until Darrisaw comes back. Run behind those guys. They were running counters. They were running duos or whatever it is. Up the middle power type of stuff. Go ahead and keep doing that with Jordan Mason, because I also don't think any team enjoys that when they're just getting slammed into by the size of these interior linemen.
Yeah, and the Colts had a great offensive line with those two guys, but when you went back and watched the few games that Fries played with Ryan Kelly at the beginning of last year, that's what Shane Steichen did with Jonathan Taylor, and I do think the Vikings will eventually get to that point. This is an offensive coaching staff, though, Matt, that is not too used to installing or keeping a lengthy, big volume run game. They're not used to having to do all that. I'm not saying they're not capable of it. I'm not saying they haven't done it before. It's just in Minnesota, this has been a pretty low volume rushing attack. So I'm curious to see how it evolves. I'm curious to see how these roles evolve that you're talking about and how consistent it's going to be. Will they stick with it? I think it was a good showing by O'Connell in the fourth quarter on Monday night. But if J.J. McCarthy shows glimpses like he did on Monday, where he's growing and showing that he can attack downfield, is that kind of carrot going to be too enticing for O'Connell to want to take shots when, frankly, this offense is built to win fights like they did on Monday?
So I'm looking at the defensive line of the Falcons, and David Onyemata has always been a good player. When he was with the Saints, was also really good against the Vikings. But I think the strength of this team is really in their back unit. I mean, from linebackers back, their safeties, Xavier Watts was really good in this game against the Tampa Bay Bucks. That's a second-round pick who had a great college career, but maybe wasn't quite the right size and speed combination. Ends up being a second-round pick. Jesse Bates is a star, and A.J. Terrell is a star, and we know Mike Hughes is a first-round talent, even if he's bounced around the league a little bit, but he's a good player. That's where I think the biggest challenge is going to come for this team, which to me says even more strongly, like, find a way to run against these guys and push around those second-level players and wear them down. Divine Diablo has become a good player for them as far as being a good tackler. I think that there's a lot of challenges there that they have to take advantage of the defensive line not being super strong, having two rookies in there as well, Jalen Walker, James Pierce, who was on the injury report this week. So that to me is, if you test their secondary a ton early on, you might get burned because they have some really good players there.
Well, Sam Darnold didn't have a problem with it last year, at least what it was last year.
Little different group, yeah.
It's different now, but I can't remember if they had everybody last year with Terrell and Bates in there, but last year was obviously Darnold's 5-touchdown game, but Addison's not going to be out there like he was last time where he caught 3 touchdowns against the Falcons. I do think they're a talented group. You saw Baker Mayfield struggle with them. Outside the deep shots to Egbuka, they didn't have too much going offensively, and maybe that's more Tampa than Atlanta. We'll find out. They got 2 really good edge rushers they drafted, but those guys are going to be coming off the bench, it would seem, in some reserved roles. So I do think that this is a team and a defense that you can take advantage of in terms of the run game, in terms of pounding that front. I do think that they're going to try and do that again and make things easy with McCarthy, because I don't know how else you're going to. I don't see this coaching staff being hoodwinked by what happened in the fourth quarter. I don't see them coming out in this game and saying, you know what, JJ, all training wheels are off now in terms of us trying to make it easy on you. Go out and win us this game. No, they're going to try and continue to ask him to, quote unquote, play quarterback 10 snaps and make it incredibly easy on him. And I think this Falcons defense sets up for them to do that. I do not think they're too feared in the front. I think the matchups the Vikings have with the O-line, with the tight ends, we got to see if Josh Oliver, how banged up that ankle is of his, because he was listed as not practicing on Wednesday. They promote Nick Vannett to the active roster. I don't know if that means that Oliver's limited or not going to play, but if they don't have him, that will definitely hurt what they have. But I do think, Matt, based on what we heard from Darrisaw and the coaching staff last week, that this might be the game he comes back. The longer he's out, the more he gets full practices in like he's doing this week, the more likely it seems that this will be Christian Darrisaw's debut.
Right. We are recording this before we get the final injury report. So we're going to talk about injuries, and maybe we'll already know some of the answers here, but I definitely watched the game like everybody else and had the same conclusion, which is they need Christian Darrisaw back. Yeah. But I also thought that there were 4, maybe 5 plays where if Darrisaw's in there, J.J. McCarthy, and sometimes you have to judge this by stuff that's your best guess, like where his helmet was pointing on the tape. Well, he was looking over there. Was he going to throw it? There is a play where Jalen Naylor has a 50-yard touchdown. Yeah. And Justin School just gets beat. And McCarthy's looking over there, and his body language is like, I'm going to do it. And then he couldn't. And if Christian Darrisaw is back, I think we get to see more of the full J.J. McCarthy experience, because so much of it was blown up by Justin School pressures. I mean, the fact that he gave up 4 pressures and you only attempted 20 passes, I mean, that's 1 every 5 passes. That just really can't happen. So this offensive line, though, after seeing Donovan Jackson actually play in a real game, because I said this, I don't know how many times, it's hard for us to figure out a guard playing Javon Hargrave in practice. Yeah. But Wes Phillips said today that he thought that the nerves were there in preseason, that he didn't have a very good preseason game, and that he kind of shook those off, and then he was ready to go. If he plays like that fairly consistently, and then these other 2 guys are proven, you get Darrisaw back, I think we saw the potential of this offensive line already.
We did, and I thought it was a little overstated where people were concerned with it in the first half, where I think it was just 7 carries for 20 yards from the running backs, and JJ's getting hit, and what did we pay for on this line? I saw it from Vikings fans, but you saw him settle in. The second half was so much better. School was obviously the weak link. The 2 opening third downs were his fault. He ends up getting called for a holding that negates an 11-yard run. He gives up the hit that is flagged for roughing on McCarthy as well. It was kind of a nightmare game from him. And I just think that, I agree with you. I think that when they bring back their premier all-world left tackle, that entire group is going to look better. And you saw the difference in the interior. Those pockets had room to step up. Both of the third downs, McCarthy tried to escape up the middle because he actually had room to do so. That is such a difference from the Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold experiences here in Minnesota.
Sounds like you're suggesting that some fans overreacted to the early
a little bit
part of the game.
They might have.
I thought they didn't do that on Blue Sky. I thought that was only.
They do that everywhere.
Oh, they do? Okay.
They do that everywhere. But if they're doing it there, then you know they're really overreacting.
That's right. On the offensive side for the Atlanta Falcons, there was a glimmer in the eye of Kevin O'Connell when he was talking about Michael Penix. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that the Vikings, had J.J. McCarthy been drafted, would have taken Michael Penix. I believe that was reported on draft night that they were perfectly comfortable with either two of those guys. It was just going to be how different is our approach, because Penix is 24 and McCarthy is 21, and there's a big difference in how much they've played football. I have had immense respect for Michael Penix the entire process. I just think that quarterbacks who don't get sacked are so hard to play against. And that's something we heard Brian Flores talk about today.
It is. And they're going from a guy who they had trouble sacking in Caleb Williams, but Caleb takes a ton of sacks. The completely different quarterback. Penix will recognize pressure. He'll get the ball out. He will, not take a negative play very often for his offense. And that's something I'm sure Kevin O'Connell loved about him during the draft process. I'm sure that's something the Falcons love about him too. And you can see the mobility even after the 2 ACLs. I know he was much more mobile at Indiana before that, and he didn't show it in college afterward, but he showed it a little bit in that game against Tampa. And I think he can get out and move a little bit more than people think. And that's going to be something he'll have to do against this Vikings defense. And so going back to 2024, I do remember hearing that the Vikings were pretty high on Michael Penix. I wasn't clear about their order of him and McCarthy. We didn't get to find out, obviously, because Penix ended up getting taken. But I do think that his traits fit so much with what Kevin O'Connell likes about quarterbacks and wants in quarterbacks. And when we heard O'Connell this week say that this guy gets explosives all over the field, no matter what, you can find turn on the tape and see that this guy will find the explosive play. I think that's one of the top things O'Connell loves in quarterbacks.
I did sort of lean forward in my chair and I was like, oh. But I think after last week, they're probably very happy, and they have been with J.J. McCarthy. I mean, I just think the 2024 class has shown when Caleb Williams is the worst quarterback of the group, and then you look at what he's done right now, right? Well, and Drake May, too, with a very bad situation. But, I mean, those guys are still... Yeah. Could be franchise quarterbacks. A lot of times, if you have 5 or 6 guys, you eliminate several of them right away. I think it just speaks to how strong the overall class was and how the Vikings timed up their quarterback situation really, really well, that they could draft McCarthy or they could draft Penix and feel good about it. And I think Penix has been the quarterback in the NFL that he was in college, which is not flawlessly accurate, but the ball comes out super fast and super hard down the field, and he's willing to take a ton of risks. And I think that that's the biggest area that I would have concern about the Vikings defense, is that there were too many dudes who were open down the field. And there were a few plays where I was just confused. How did this route get wide open? Like, why was somebody's eyes in the backfield? There's a play where Byron Murphy is taking a step toward the check down and the ball goes right behind him. It's like, was it then an assignment or did he mess something up? The opportunities that were left on the field by Caleb Williams will not be left there by Michael Penix.
No, I don't think they will either, or at least not as many of them. And when you're talking about the play that Byron Murphy got let behind him. I'm not even sure which one you're talking about because there's multiple. Are you talking about the touchdown? Because that was one too.
It was like a 20-yard completion.
Yeah, there was the touchdown where Byron's turning back looking at Theo like, why did you just abandon that area that I passed the guy off into? And seemingly some kind of miscommunication there. There was the 30-yarder to DJ Moore where I think Flores just said today that was on Isaiah Rodgers for letting the double post go behind him where Theo was way back behind him in creating that void. And so I think they missed Harrison Smith. I think they had some growing pains with this new secondary coming together. I do not think it was a coincidence that Brian Flores seemed to slow play the start of the season with basically all 4-man rushes to start that game. He did not blitz or send a 5-man rush until the 18th snap for Chicago in the second quarter. And then when they did, Ivan Pace missed the tackle. He was by then the 4th defender to miss Caleb Williams at that point because Jonathan Allen, Grenard, all the guys had. Penix will be a little easier mark there, but he's going to get the ball out if you create those voids or leave them open. And I think even at this young age, he's going to make mistakes. He's not going to be perfect, but he's got the willingness to stand in the pocket, take a hit, and has the arm talent to push it into spots that Caleb Williams has not displayed the discipline to do that, frankly, at USC or at his 1.5 years or 1 in 1 game, I should say, 1 year and 1 game in the NFL so far.
So that's the thing that I am interested as well, because I think that Flores now has multiple buttons to push. As you mentioned, you can rush 4 and see how it goes. And then if you need the pressure, then you get it. Or you could come out, and this is how I would approach it, I think, with a quarterback who's never played in US Bank Stadium before. The way I might do it is I'm going to send the blitz like crazy to start the game and make me stop. Because the blitzes are just different in US Bank Stadium than they are anywhere else.
The noise.
Right. It's so much more difficult. And I mean, there's a lot of numbers on this for sacks, but US Bank Stadium is one of the biggest gaps between home and away sacks. Like they get a lot of them at US Bank Stadium because you could get off the line of scrimmage quicker. They're doing the silent counts, but if you pick up on those, you can have a lot of success. And I think that the edge rushers, we'll see about, Dallas Turner versus Andrew Van Ginkel being in or out. But Dallas Turner, we saw, well, let's talk about that next. But I just think that if it's a young quarterback who's never been here before, I want that quarterback to prove it to me first.
Well, I do wonder, too, how much of the vanilla approach seemingly with the pass rush on Monday night was about what you're saying, being in a road environment where Caleb can hear everything they're saying. And this is a checked-based defense that is going to be doing those things where if you are showing a rush and Caleb checks into something, the Vikings will have a built-in counter to whatever they're trying to check into. Maybe week 1, you don't have the volume of Ben Johnson's offense to do that, and maybe that was also part of it. But to your point, I do think the crowd noise factored into it, and I do think the crowd noise at US Bank, because we just heard Flores this week say, I want to tell everybody, I had a note written down, be loud. And he didn't say this, but I'm sure he wanted to say, be drunk. So you're extra loud because we want this to be an incredibly awful environment for Michael Penix to operate.
Night game here at US Bank Stadium. I'm not sure if anybody will
be imbibing
before the game. I don't know about that.
No.
This going back to their weapons though. I want to talk about Dallas Turner first and then their weapons, because Dallas Turner played 43% of the snaps in the first game, and I saw him flash several times, had a couple of pressures, had a really nice couple of run stops, and I think you walk out of the game feeling very good after watching on tape of Dallas Turner, and I guess Flores must have felt very good as well because he said he was mad at himself for not having him on the field a little bit more. Now, I think when they're playing in certain situations, it's a lot of dime and things like that where maybe he wouldn't be out there, but he might be needed a lot in this ball game, and I think we will find out something about Dallas Turner and where he stands. I also think that we don't have to have every single game be a referendum on Dallas Turner. We just don't have to do that. Like, he looked comfortable. He was effective in his role. That's what he was supposed to do today. If he doesn't get 4 sacks in the game, we don't have to call him a bust on the internet over and over and over again. Like, I like where he's at right now after watching the first game, and I'm very curious to see how he builds on it.
Yeah, fans need to realize he's on an upward trajectory that's not media created. This isn't just us being like, yeah, guys, their first round pick turned out. No, this is the coaching staff telling the media and then us telling you that he's done better. He has more of a routine. I talked to Dallas after practice this week, and he talked about how my week-to-week routine is so much better. What I'm studying in the opponent is so much more advanced than it was a year ago. And just how I feel physically going into these games, I was more confident. And his role is different this year. You saw him go into this game. It was only 43%, but it was in almost at least the first half. They played him quite a bit in a starter role as one of like a 3-4 DN type with Van Ginkel off the edge and then him dropping and then those guys shifting into underfronts and kind of mixing things up before the snap. You saw him be able to be versatile in that front, and he can drop into a stack position too, which he might have to do if he's in Van Ginkel's shoes coming up here. And I think overall, you're seeing that confidence grow with him, which is huge because we've seen it from rookies who come in and don't contribute right away. They get frustrated, they get down on themselves, and then it becomes a spiral that then the belief gets lost. And that, whether that was Lewis Seen, whether that was Brian Asamoah, we've seen guys flash and then just kind of fade away, whereas Dallas Turner really struggled. And I was shocked to see this. When I looked up that snap count from Sunday or Monday night, his most he's ever played in a game remains his first ever NFL game at 49% in New York a year ago. They have not gotten him in the game more than that up to this point, and it's obviously very early, but I think that's going to change on Sunday night.
Yeah, it's time to do that. They also benefit from doing that. I mean, if somebody's on the field for half the snaps, they're at 100%. They're flying off the bench. Yeah. I mean, you want these D-line rotations. The best defensive lines, and I thought they did an amazing job of this in the first game, was getting in Jalen Redmond, getting in Levi Drake Rodriguez. We saw a little bit of Ty Ingram Dawkins, who I feel like you and I have been talking about for quite a while. I think I was
surprised to see him in there as much as he was.
I was too, but the first conversation I think we had with Ty, we were kind of like, this guy seems like he gets it. You know, I don't know what it is, but sometimes you can just be like, that guy, I think he understands what he needs to do here. So this rotation, and then with Turner, is the best possible scenario if you're not having, and we'll see on Van Ginkel, but if you're not having Van Ginkel and Grenard have to take every snap, or if you're putting them out there at the same time, that's just not something a lot of defenses have, which forces your opponent to try to have a counter against it. So I agree with you that the arrow is pointed up, and I think that Turner came in with the right mentality really from day one of this season, and we're going to have to see how it progresses. We're not going to decide if he was worth the draft capital, and we just don't have to do that every single week. How is he going to impact this week's game? I think if Van Ginkel is not playing, then he's got a chance to show a little lightning off the edge against this team.
Yeah, we should also mention with Van Ginkel that he was out for 3-4 weeks with a neck injury from training camp and now has the concussion. So even if he does play, I can't imagine it's going to be at the full capacity we saw on Monday.
Speaking of the injuries, a guy that we do know is out is Blake Cashman, and Eric Wilson, what a signing for them and just the hero of that game aside from the quarterback. This group of weapons is pretty dangerous. Yeah. If Drake London is playing, Darnell Mooney can go down the field, and Bijan Robinson is one of the best at his position in the NFL. Robinson at 100 yards receiving, not much on the ground for the Falcons. And this is my big question about them. When I look at this offensive line on my phone, that doesn't look as good as last year's when this Falcons team really moved the ball effectively against Flores, because they are missing Drew Dahlman, who is a very good center, especially when it came to run blocking. And they're also missing Caleb McGarry, who is
their center now? Somebody named Ryan Newsill.
Yeah, old Newsy.
Old Newsy.
Yep, Newsy's playing center. And Elijah Wilkinson is their tackle. That doesn't sound the same as two guys who are two of the better at their craft. And that's where I think if the Vikings can shut that part of it down, it does become very difficult to sit there, snap in and snap out. I respect Penix. Everyone likes Penix. Kevin O'Connell is going to hold on to that hug for maybe an extra second after the game with Penix. It's not Drew Brees yet.
No, he's not. I do think... before I get accused of throwing cold water on all the overreactions, I agree with people, the secondary little suspect here, but I do think there was some overreaction to the quote-unquote lack of pass rush, when really it was just a lack of sacks and lack of finish in that game. And frankly, Ben Johnson was doing a lot of chipping, a lot of max protect, a lot of Detroit Lions type stuff, and seemed to be anticipating blitzes from Brian Flores that did not come often. So it left their four-man rush, and frankly, it left Jonathan Allen, I thought, double-teamed a lot. And when he was single-blocked, you saw him make an impact. He missed Caleb Williams in the backfield twice. He could have had 2 sacks before Hargrave did. So these guys now going up against this line, I feel like at home, with the noise that Penix is going to have to deal with, it should look a lot better with their 4-man rush when they go to it. You're right. Drew Dahlman being gone, they just faced him in Chicago. That was a tougher test than what old Newsy is going to be for them in Atlanta or with Atlanta.
The old newser.
The old newsy. The old newsy. So I do think this 4-man defensive line looked good and lived up to the hype. I think Renard can play better. There was a couple misses from him that just were uncharacteristic, and you see him typically finish plays like that. So if they get a better game from him, the 2 interior guys are going to play as they did on Monday night. Penix is going to have to get the ball out, which means if there's no Okudah, is it going to be Dwight McGlothern tackling on the perimeter when they go nickel? Are they going to go 3 safety nickel if Harrison Smith is returning with Theo Jackson in there? The tackling from the secondary is going to be so paramount because I expect this ball to come out very quickly.
I should have mentioned that Okudah is very likely to be out in this game. And then, Brian Flores said today, Dwight McGlothern's the next man up. I would also say that Flores doesn't always tell 100% the truth with who's the next guy playing, right. And he doesn't have to.
It could be Fabian Moreau.
Right, exactly. Yeah. There's no law against saying at a press conference, I want the truth about Dwight Nudie McGlothern. No, it's not like that. So it may actually not be, but that will be a good test there to what they have in Dwight McGlothern and how much they're willing to play him, because they played Jay Ward a lot in the last game, and they only played Okudah 17 snaps. And if that's all they need from McGlothern or Morrow or whoever they're putting in there, or they may just stick with 3 safeties the entire time and say, we're just going to handle it with Josh Metellus. Who's in and who's out kind of has a big impact on this game and how Flores has to adapt this game plan against Michael Penix. But the thing about Penix that I have noticed, though, is as much as he does get the ball out pretty quickly and he doesn't take sacks, he was pressured. I mean, so that offensive line that we were talking about, Tampa Bay did get to him in terms of creating pressure. He's just not going to take a sack. So they have to consistently be creating that pressure because they are short on the back end.
Yeah, and I didn't even mention about, you brought up Blake Cashman's injury, but this is not a great game to be missing your leading tackler from last year, the guy who can rally and the guy who, frankly, was the designated spy on Caleb Williams for many times on Monday night. They're not going to need to spy Michael Penix, but they're going to need guys to run to perimeter screens, chase down Bijan, chase down Mooney, whoever they go to. Ray McLeod is basically their screen guy in Atlanta, and we saw him get a bunch of catches against the Vikings last year because they needed to dump the ball off so quickly. So I think Cashman's injury is going to be a tough one for them in this game specifically. And I think they are better suited to make up for it, though, this year than they were last year. I like Eric Wilson better than Camus Grugier-Hill in that spot. I think Wilson just brings more. Whatever it is, he plays like he's 25, and yet this guy's like 30. He's been in the league now for 8 years, and it's been kind of timeless for them. For the Green Bay before, for the Vikings before that. I think he's gonna help them, but it's still gonna be less than what Cashman would have been giving you, and I wouldn't be shocked if we're seeing a big play over the middle because Cashman's not there. Right,
he has become a very, very good player. Cashman's a superstar in the league. There is a difference. It's great to have the drop-off be to good player, to average or above average player, but if Eric Wilson was a full-time starter, he would be full-time starting somewhere in the league. So the best fill-in guy probably in the NFL for this position, and way different from last year. But not ideal to not have Blake Cashman when you're facing Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. That's a huge challenge. And before we get to the kind of prediction of how we see this playing out, I would like you to apologize to Miles Price, one of the stars of the game against the Bears. Boy, an old take exposed from you for last week. You questioned him. You doubted him.
I did. I'm sorry. I got to issue an apology to Mr. Price, the Price family. I will indeed say the Price is right. He looked pretty good out there.
He really did.
I mean, just fearless, just nothing back there. It didn't matter. And the coaches kept saying through the summer, like, nothing's going to be too big for this kid. But we always also hear them say, we don't really know until he gets out there. And lo and behold, nothing was too big for him. That was pretty cool.
There's something there, and I don't know why it is. And there's one per every 10,000 football players that can do this.
Yeah.
Percy Harvin was like this. Sherrills was like this, where they go back there and the ball is floating out of the sky in the wind. There's 70,000 people looking at you. They're coming to kill you. And they're just like, oh, I got it. And then his explosiveness and decisiveness really stood out to me because there was space that Chicago gave him to make those returns. But there was no like, oh, I'm going to dance around. I'm going to see where to go. It was just like, go. And I don't know what it is about that guy, but there's something there. So here's how I see this football game playing out. They're going to kick the ball off. Someone will return it. Then they'll have a first play. And then we'll see where it goes. Wow. Yeah, I know that's the prediction.
If that happens.
That's it. No,
take it to the bank.
I got 24-20 Minnesota Vikings. I think it's close. I think it's good. I think the quarterbacks show out, but also the Vikings defense will prevail, and the operation for the Vikings will look a lot smoother.
I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. Not at all. I wouldn't be shocked if they do open up with a kickoff and an opening play and all that. I think the Vikings defense is going to be I think they're going to give up some big plays in this game, more big plays than they gave up in the last game. But I also think they themselves are going to create more big plays because Penix is not going to run around like Caleb Williams. He's going to have to put the ball in play sooner. Even if Van Ginkel is not there to pick off a screen, which, boy, wouldn't this be the perfect game for Van Ginkel to be healthy for, but he's not. Even if they don't have him, I still think they're going to create some turnovers and some havoc that they couldn't on Monday night or just didn't until late in that game. And I think that'll be the difference. I think it'll be something like 28-27, an incredibly close game, just like the last one. I think, though, this offense will get off to a better start. I actually think it might look a little more lopsided the other way, where maybe the Vikings jump out to a hot start and then the Falcons kind of claw back. Because I imagine the noise, I imagine the fan base, I imagine just the noise that Penix is going to be hearing is going to be deafening to start this game.
Claw back. That's good.
Rawr. I don't know.
I think it's more of a cacaw, but the FanDuel line on this is 3.5. It actually moved from 4.5 to 3.5. I don't know if that was maybe some of the injuries, the injury report, or I think it was possibly based on Drake London practicing because he was injured and it was unclear after that. But I think that's an indication of the world thinks that this is going to be a pretty good ball game. It's Sunday Night Football, and you know that they want it to be. So we will see. You and I will both be there. And we'll just have to figure out how it all plays out, Mr. Krammer.
We'll see. Football. Can't wait.
Whoa.
Can't wait.
Football.
There you go. My conversation with Andrew Krammer there of the Star Tribune. Any reactions, thoughts? Feel free to let me know. Next discussion coming up very shortly. Stephen Ruiz of The Ringer on what he thought and his quarterback analysis of Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy and several other quarterbacks that we get into as well, and where McCarthy has to go next this week. Any more questions you got, I'm happy to answer. Don't forget the FanDuel question of the day. Over under 212.5 yards. And what do you want to see from J.J. McCarthy in his second career start? But I also thought that, well, we're sitting here with a slate of games that you guys are going to get to watch on Sunday as you wait. No, Joe, you're right. I don't know. Why did Andrew Krammer say claw back and then say rawr? I thought that was a perfect pun. But maybe he just accidentally said that. But since you're going to be sitting around waiting for Vikings and Falcons on Sunday, we should go over the other games that will be leading up to that game and what we think of those. Some are very relevant already to the Minnesota Vikings. So we start out the day with Browns and Ravens. That's a football game, but the Rams at the Titans, somewhat interested to see Cam Ward in his second career start. Chicago and Detroit. This is a 6.5 point favorite. Detroit at home against the Chicago Bears. And I don't know if you guys saw this today. Kelvin Shepard, the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, gave one of the most bizarre press conferences I think I've ever seen, where he was just like yelling out crazed answers at the media when they were asking questions. And I gotta say, not exactly the look that you're going for after getting dog walked in the first week and your defense looks pretty clueless against the Green Bay Packers. And then you come out with this strange, and maybe he's just never spoken to the media before. I don't know, but is that how anybody else does it? Like, you guys have seen the clips of KOC, Brian Flores, Wes Phillips, Matt Daniels. Do they talk like lunatics up there? Usually not. That is kind of a red flag of someone who maybe is a tad defensive about how their team played in week one. But Detroit is under the gun here right away with this game because if they lose to Chicago and Green Bay, and start out 0 Tombstone against two NFC North teams, especially one that is a much maligned Chicago Bears team that just blew a lead and gave up 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and their quarterback's having 30,000 word articles written about how much of a mess he is and everything else. Chicago wins that game at Ford Field in their home opener, and suddenly all that questioning of Detroit looks pretty smart. So this is a big one, but Vegas clearly pushing toward Detroit. And I also think that if you're the Lions, after watching Washington get taken apart by the defense of Green Bay, that now looks like hands down the best defense in the National Football League, you might feel a little bit better like, oh, well, they just did that to a guy who was in the NFC Championship. And you can't say enough about how impressive Green Bay's defense has been with Micah Parsons. Of course, on this show, we don't crown anybody until they deserve to be crowned. But that was a heck of a performance and also was pretty revealing about Washington and some of the shortcomings that they may have on their offensive line, some of the shortcomings that they may have on their defense as well in that game. But this is a huge one for Detroit. They need to win or it's kind of all out panic mode. You've got Buffalo and the New York Jets. Interested to see Justin Fields. The Bills could not handle a running quarterback in week one. He was a much better running quarterback. Still, the Jets put up points in their opener, and now Buffalo goes to New York looking to play some better defense. Giants and Cowboys, I will not be watching. Moving on. Saints 49ers. Not a chance. New England and the Dolphins. When are the good games? Wow, this is a slate with some rough matchups. Now, here's one I'm interested in. The Jaguars and the Bengals. The Jaguars last week, I know it was against Carolina, but you've got my attention. Jaguars. Travis Hunter's playing as a wide receiver. They've got Brian Thomas, an emerging star. Trevor Lawrence looked a little better last week. And Cincinnati looked pretty darn rough. Cincinnati on the Vikings schedule in week 3. So this is one I will be watching a lot actually to start the preparation for that game. If Cincinnati at home does not play well offensively against the Jags, then wow, right? Like then they're going to come to US Bank Stadium pretty desperate. In fact, I think you'd probably rather from a Vikings perspective see them just blast the Jaguars by 20 points. Be like, okay, well, they're not coming in as a cornered animal, as a cornered Bengal. But what a cat matchup, by the way. That one though, the Bengals, I don't know what it is with their slow starts to seasons. It's pretty wild. But they've got an opportunity to kind of bounce back from an ugly win against the Browns. And the Jaguars just have, a good amount of talent. And I think they probably did under Doug Peterson too, and just fell apart as kind of a culture. Here's a good one. Seattle at Pittsburgh. Seattle, tough game against San Francisco. Pittsburgh, Aaron trying to do what he can to continue last week. Really good offensive game plan against the Jets, but they are the Jets. Seattle has a much better defense. Indianapolis and the top scoring Indianapolis Colts and Daniel Jones against Denver, where Bo Nix didn't play that well and they just played Tennessee, got a fairly easy win. That one, I think that Indianapolis does have a lot of talent. And if Daniel Jones can execute their offense, but they're going against a top-notch defense. So that one actually might be a rock'em sock'em game. Carolina, Arizona, not that interested. And Eagles and Chiefs at Kansas City as the lead-in to Atlanta and Minnesota. That one, again, you have my attention. And with Kansas City, it is on them to show that they are still Kansas City in this game by beating the Eagles. And it's not like they got murdered by Kansas City or by Los Angeles in the first week, but they just looked so how do you describe this? Like Swiss cheese. Like there was a lot of good stuff there, but there's a lot of holes. That's what they looked like in the first week on their defense. Can they create pass rush? Can they slow down Saquon Barkley? Can they cover anybody? I didn't see a lot of that in week 1 as Justin Herbert was lighting them up. And on the offensive side, are they going to find themselves in a hole here? I mean, if they lose a couple of games, they could suddenly be human without their top two wide receivers, Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice. So that one should be a good game. Philadelphia didn't play perfect against Dallas. In fact, Philadelphia could have lost that game against Dallas. They didn't run as effectively. And you're wondering, is the offensive line quite the same as it was last year? Is Saquon Barkley the same as he was last year? A lot of storylines there. And they may even show your guys' favorite pop star at the game. And I know you guys get very excited about that. So that will be a good one as well. And what do we got here? We got multiple Monday night games. Is that what's going on? Monday night? Two Monday night games, huh? Both look like they could be pretty good. I want to watch the Raiders. The Raiders are a team I really want to watch. And they are playing against the Los Angeles Chargers. Ooh, that should be a good one. Yeah, that should make for a good Monday night. Well, that means, you know what that means? I'm going to have to kick off the stream early so I can make sure I watch both of those games. So look forward to that on Monday. So there are some of your most interesting games, and the line for Philadelphia on FanDuel and Kansas City is 1.5 favorite for Philly. You almost never see that at Kansas City. That is an interesting one. And just if you were curious, the Bengals 3.5-point favorites against the Jaguars. Steelers are 3-point favorites against Seattle, and Indianapolis 2.5-point underdog to Denver. So FanDuel not exactly buying the start of Daniel Jones. They were giving more credit to the Miami Dolphins. So there's some of the rundown of the games for this week, and answer a couple more questions, and then we could get to Stephen Ruiz of The Ringer to close out the night. So K-Mac says, good punt returning, strong interior lines, rookie scale quarterback, waited a long time for these, and now they have them all. No, you're right about that, K-Mac. I mean, I feel like as we were going through the roster year after year, it got redundant. Somebody asked me today in the mailbag, like, aren't you excited about this? And like, you guys know this, I'm always excited to cover football, but sometimes it did become redundant and frustrating to talk about, well, you know, they could have won that ball game if Kirk Cousins could escape the rush. And, you know, if they only didn't have a guard who got destroyed by Akeem Hicks or Eddie Goldman, or, you know, if they only had, well, I don't know how many times have we ever said if they only had a punt returner, but, you know, maybe we thought about it. There was just a lot of things that this team, interior rush was one that frustrated me for a while. I was laughing a bit today because Oso Digizua got an award. I think was he player of the week or something. I forget. He plays for Dallas, and he was a guy that I had been interested in the 2021 draft. And I was thinking about how many times they passed up on defensive tackles that might have become interior rushers. Now they have them, and they were very, very good on Monday night. So you're right about that. A lot of those boxes were checked. Will says, do we need to bring in another corner? Well, they did, but it's not a guy you've ever heard of. And I just don't think that there's another big name corner who's on the way. I don't think that the cavalry is coming of just a group of corners that are arriving to save you. You got what you got. And if you get to if you go to the free agency on over the cap, it's guys that are 35 or haven't played in a while. You might be able to pick somebody up off another team's practice squad. You might be able to make a trade, but right now it's not a desperate situation. Losing Okudah is not a desperate situation. McGlothern versus Okudah, I don't even know how much of a drop off that is from someone who I didn't really trust to begin with in Okudah based on his career to someone who's not played before. Well, you know, 50 cents or a $50, I think, but the starters are still in. They struggled in the first game. It's the first game. Both of those guys have played plenty in the NFL. Now, if Murphy goes down or Rodgers goes down, then you have to start talking about it. I don't think they're talking about it just yet for who to acquire. And you still have Fabian Morrow as well that no one ever gets excited about. But my thing is Fabian Morrow has played just as well as any of the other guys you're talking about picking up. Anyway, Jay Mulls, do you think that Darrisaw isn't back at school, has another terrible game? If Darrisaw is not ready for the Bengals game, they'll give Walter Rouse a shot. I do think that that is plausible. We have seen them pull the trigger on some of those moves before, right? Like last year when Ed Ingram was struggling as much as he was, that Dalton Reisner ends up coming up off the bench. They have not hesitated too much when they haven't liked how someone's performing to bench that player and then put somebody else in. It's just, they evaluated Rouse all summer long, and I think he's a developing player, but they went out and got school intentionally for this. It would have to be a big struggle. And I agree with what Rob said earlier. It was not good, but it also was not so bad that it was unplayable, unwatchable. It was not TJ Clemmings. It was not some of the guys we've seen in the past. I think part of it is just some might have been matchup. Some also for you watching it is that you've seen the best over there for a long time and you're just used to nothing happening at the left tackle position. Let's see. Is T-Law ever going to break out? Who is T-Law? Am I missing someone? Who feels like we've even got a who we talking about there? Let's see. Mama says, hope the Bears beat the Lions. Caleb seems like a quarterback that will crash and burn when it matters later in the season, whereas I'd rather not have Jared Goff start racking up W's. No, I totally agree, Mama. I totally agree on that. If you're the Vikings, you are rooting for Chicago. Chicago is not a serious contending team, where Detroit, if they get some confidence and they get rolling, they could be. They could resolve their interior. And I do think you have to grade on a curve now. After you've seen Green Bay demolish two teams that were in the divisional round of the playoffs last year, and one of them is in the NFC Championship, and Green Bay's defense takes them apart, you have to figure that Detroit's probably better than what you saw at Green Bay. And if they beat the Bears and they're 1-1 and they get rolling, then there you go. And then you get rolling. Oh, Trevor Lawrence. Okay. Sorry, Mom. I was like, who is T-Law? I was trying to think of like Ty Law. He's in the Hall of Fame. But I was thinking, my mind was at Vikings. Wasn't it Trevor Lawrence? I'll get to that in a second. But I agree with you on just the Bears are a 9-win team at absolute best, probably more close to 7 or 8, where Detroit, they get hot. They could be a serious contender still. They've still got enough talent. Like, we can't write them off after 1 week. As far as Trevor Lawrence goes, I don't think that Trevor Lawrence will ever be the quarterback that he was purported to be in the draft. I think that Trevor Lawrence can lead. He's already done it. Can lead a team into the playoffs, can play against another team in the playoffs and give his team a chance. And this is how the quarterbacks are separated now. As I'm leading into Steven Ruiz and that interview about the quarterbacks and, JJ McCarthy and everything else, the quarterbacks are broken into sections now. You have the GOATs, the guys who are untouchable, legends of the game, Lamar, Allen, Mahomes, Burrow. I put those four just in a totally different stratosphere as everybody else. And then after that, there is this group that are all kind of chunked together to me that any one of them could win. And they usually won't, but if they have the right year and the right circumstances, that's your Justin Herbert, that's your Dak Prescott, that you always wonder, like, if Dak played for a more competent team. If Dak's here, doesn't he throw for like 5,000 yards? I mean, he's really good, but that thing is a circus. So, you got this group that can kind of go up and down. Jared Goff's in this group. I think Jordan Love's in this group. And then you got the group below that sort of needs a miracle. Trevor Lawrence has kind of looked most times like he needs a miracle, but I think he belongs in that Jordan Love, and I think he belongs in that Jared Goff and Dak Prescott. I think he belongs there much more than he belongs where he's been, which is in the group of just need a miracle, not that good. Jobless entrepreneur. Hopefully you get to change that name soon. Do you think that Darrisaw was ready, but they're comfortable with him out starting so soon? Well, yeah, I don't really know. Like, it was a little bit odd. The whole, he was, limited in practice, then full go last week. And then he is available for warmups because he's questionable, but then he's not questionable this week. And it seems like there's some rule book involved that the explanation kind of got by me, and I was having trouble really interpreting and understanding it even after another question. But either way, with Darrisaw, I just think that you have to be as patient as possible and that these things are not always smooth when you're coming off an injury that's that serious. So play him when he's fully ready to play. If he started week 4, you still got 13 games to get Christian Darrisaw. And where do you really want to win? I mean, you really want to win the playoffs. You got to make sure that he is good to go for an entire season. So if it takes several more weeks, I don't expect it to be 4 because otherwise they would have put him on IR to start the year. But even if it's another week next week, not ideal. You have to survive it and work your way through it. That's all we can really do. Mr. Mayor, no one wants to be the guy who drafted a generational talent in Trevor Lawrence and then didn't sign him to a second contract. Yeah, that's true. But also he did show that he could get to the playoffs and win a playoff game and even pull a comeback. I mean, think about that. Like, how would you feel if JJ McCarthy did the same thing as Trevor Lawrence in what was his second year and pulled a comeback and came within a play or two of beating Kansas City in the playoffs? I mean, you would be all in on that guy, even if he went through some other struggles. And so I think that Lawrence has shown it at times. I think with a guy like him, supporting cast is a huge deal. A guy like Josh Allen, it's not. He's out there throwing to Keon Coleman, who's okay, and Khalil Shakir, who's okay. And it's like, whatever. Guys are just going to bounce off him. It's not going to matter. But for somebody like Trevor Lawrence, it does. And I wouldn't wish being labeled a generational talent on anybody coming out in the draft, because then they just assume you're flawless and throw you right in even if you're not ready, as we saw from the Chicago Bears. So speaking of quarterbacks, let's end this evening. Great conversations, guys. Great discussion. Let's end this evening with Steven Ruiz of The Ringer, who you can bet will drive you guys crazy ranking quarterbacks this year, but very detailed in his analysis. He also, well, you'll hear me talk about it, was out at training camp as well. A good friend of mine. So here is Steven Ruiz.
All right, we welcome into the show from The Ringer, actually an OG guest of this show, Steven Ruiz. I don't even remember who you worked for the first time you came on the show, Steven, but now NFL analyst with The Ringer and the man who lights up the internet with quarterback rankings. Let me tell you, Steven, it is not an easy job to rank them quarterbacks because we get told a lot of lies by the NFL, lies on week-to-week basis, lies in the offseason. Oh, the guy's got it all figured out this year in training camp, and then he comes out in the field and he doesn't, or he does. There could be performances that are pumped up by, well, I don't know, 1 quarter of good play, etc. It is the trickiest thing in sports. It is the most fascinating thing in sports, and you study it on a weekly basis. And I was very happy to see you out at Vikings training camp. Steven, you actually got to see the training camp practice that we talked about for weeks that JJ McCarthy had. So why don't we just begin there with when you came out to Minnesota, what you saw from JJ McCarthy, how that meshed with what you saw on Monday night. How you feeling as the quarterback ranker, my friend?
Quarterback rankings are always tough, especially with young quarterbacks that a fan base has grown attached to. And I can't complain about this phenomenon because, I capitalize on it. Like the quarterback rankings are I don't even know what word to use, but they're as popular as they are because people are crazy about quarterbacks. But what I saw out of JJ in training camp, like I was impressed. I know we were chatting, I think it was during the second practice where he really stepped it up. I think he had a up and down day on the first day. But command of the offense, I think he layering has been a big thing all offseason. We saw a couple of those throws during the training camp compared to what I saw Monday night in Chicago. I mean, it's always going to be an apples to oranges comparison when you're comparing like practice to a game. But I think we saw some of the question marks pop up with him. We saw some of the things that were just unknowable because we had never seen him play in an NFL game, like how he would manage an NFL pocket. You knew there was going to be a work in progress there. We didn't really see him have to layer the ball too much, so that's still like an open-ended question. But the resilience, like it's undeniable after having the start he had, and I don't think that was totally on him. I think the offense and the game plan just wasn't working at first, and then once they got the run game rolling in the second half, I think we saw why I think the Vikings coaches were excited about him and why I was optimistic about him coming into the season. I think I'd rather see it over 4 quarters of a game before I give him, too much credit for it. But it was encouraging that we saw that finish. It would have been much worse if we didn't see that fourth quarter.
The first couple of quarters, as I'm there in Chicago, and I'm having the same reaction as everyone else, which is what is going on? And look, also, you talk about undeniable. It's undeniable that he was shaky to start with the operation, which they talked about so much for the preseason game. Oh, he was great in and out of the huddle, and he's doing a great job in practice in and out of the huddle. And then, as Kevin O'Connell said, the F-18s fly over the stadium and the national anthem kicks up and the actual Chicago Bears are coming to kill you and not your teammates who just yell sack as they run by you. It's a very different experience, but the fact that he was not shaken by that, and I kind of go back to watching early Justin Fields, if someone wants an example of the opposite of this, where it was a young quarterback that when he got into those situations where it wasn't flowing for him, kind of disappeared, kind of wilted a bit. And that's one of the hardest things to do in the NFL is to keep pounding like that. I also thought, Steven, rewatching the game, that even though the performance was not good early on, it wasn't that the decisions were horrible. I mean, I brought this up yesterday on the show, they run a mesh concept where the receivers run directly into each other, which is, not exactly pro level stuff there. And rather than just sort of freaking out and being like, football, JJ McCarthy went, oh, my receivers just messed that up. I'm just going to take a sack or get a yard here or try to run a little bit. The fact that he didn't throw that game away as things were going so badly, and even the pick six, according to Kevin O'Connell and some other analysts, is not even the worst decision. I thought his decision making was not bad in those moments.
No, I think from a decision making standpoint, you didn't really see any red flags for me. And just to give you the inside baseball behind the rankings this week, I think he ended up dropping a little bit, and it was more so the guys below him kind of impressed me more than he didn't impress me. Spencer Rattler, I thought had a great game. I know people are complaining about him being ahead of McCarthy, but just go watch the Cardinals game. And then Cam Ward, I thought was fantastic. The tape is good, but for him, the things that I docked him points, I just docked him 1 point in accuracy because I thought the ball placement wasn't there. I think his macro level accuracy was fine, and I looked at this after I graded him, but he was third in inaccurate catchable ball rate based on PFF's grading. So take that for what it is. And then the other thing was just pocket management. It's not necessarily I thought the mesh concept you mentioned, I think that was near the beginning of the game. I thought he handled that situation well, but for me, it was more taking advantage of space in the pocket and navigating. I think the one sack, it might've been the last sack he took in the second half, where he drops back 11 yards, and that does not help his tackles out at all. Naylor, I think, wins on the outside, so he would have had an opportunity for a touchdown, and he takes a sack. I think, and then the batted balls and not being able to find throwing windows, I think that's where my concern is from the pocket management standpoint of things. So it was just little things, the accuracy and the pocket management. And we didn't get to see the full gamut of his strengths. The game management stuff wasn't necessarily there because it is his first start. You got to give him a break for that, give him some grace for that. But yeah, it was an interesting performance for him. And I think it was just one where it's all right, we still have question marks about him going forward. It wasn't super informative outside of the resilience part, which is a big box to check, just not a box that I'm accounting for in my rankings.
Right. No, and I totally agree. And he mentioned yesterday about getting to the right depth in his drop. So I think he was probably referring to the same play that you're talking about. And it was ballpark accuracy and not pinpoint accuracy. Justin Jefferson had 2 drops, but neither one of those drops were an accurate throw. And if they are accurate throws, then it's not one that you're asking him to slide down to the ground or to go, which Jefferson catches those. And he's one of the reasons that you're always comfortable with whoever's playing quarterback, but those are not great throws from McCarthy. And he did have a couple other ones that were very impressive. I thought his touchdown throw to Jefferson, who just takes on double coverage like nobody else and snaps off that route. And then it's a dot to the right spot to him in the end zone. So there was, I think, some high level velocity throws from JJ McCarthy for when we're talking about, well, can he give the ball, that oomph behind it? Like, I think he can. We were having a discussion on the show the other night just about the way that he throws the football. This was something some folks criticized when he came out about him putting his body behind it and how much he puts behind it. I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it could be an issue, but I think there's like upside to it also. Like we see the power he generates. I almost compare him to like a middle infielder throwing the football, like a shortstop just ripping a throw to the first baseman. You definitely see some of that, and I think there's a give and take there. I think like he gets extra power on the throw that you wouldn't expect out of a guy his frame, but then you also have the touch questions that we've all been asking and the layering questions and I think that's where it comes at a cost. And I think there is a chance that he can balance those two things and get the best of both worlds. But again, the guy is like, 22, 23 years old. We've seen him play one NFL start. So it's always hard to like place these talking points on a guy because they tend to stick. Like even on looking at the other side of it, like the good part of Monday night and the resilience and the fourth quarter comeback. Like imagine your first time ever watching Kirk Cousins was the Colts comeback. You'd be like, oh my God, this guy is like the most resilient quarterback of all time. I want him leading my locker room. And like, if you watch the rest of Kirk Cousins' career and followed it, I don't think you would have that sentiment. So it's just, it's week one and it's fun to do this. And we always read into stuff too much, especially with one game sample size. But I think we saw some positives and I think we saw some negatives and some things that will cause us to kind of just question what are the strengths and weaknesses of his game. And there's only one way to find out, and that's to watch the football.
Yeah, right. And I totally agree with you that the number of answers on how he's actually going to play quarterback when you get 20 pass attempts is not really very high. When it comes to his throwing, I agree that sort of benefits and drawbacks because the velocity he put on that ball. So normally you would throw that to Jefferson slightly earlier, and we're talking milliseconds. But there's nobody that could get to it with how fast it's traveling. So like it's ever so slightly late, but it's also going so fast that it hits him, I think, in the landmark, which is just going to be a little bit different from a quarterback. Like Tom Brady had this super quick, release that ball would have been out. But I also think in other instances, it will require him because it takes a little bit longer for his windup to play with some more anticipation. And I just think that's going to have to be how he works through this, and he's going to grow and he's going to get stronger, and he's probably 5 years away from his maximum, strength with this, which I guess leads us to another question of now, like, how does Kevin O'Connell navigate the coming weeks? Because I think the best version of JJ McCarthy is when O'Connell ran more of Sam Darnold stuff, more of like deep play action, that out route that he throws that, I don't know, what is that, like a 17-yard gain, but he probably throws the ball 40 yards in the air. And it's on, right. It was on a line to the sideline, perfect spot. I mean, he's got the arm to make all these throws that are intermediate area and downfield. I think O'Connell's going to have to throw out the 3-yard mesh and focus on those throws that work for McCarthy.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you were talking about with the timing and him kind of having to make up for some time with the arm strength. I think you saw it on the Thielen drop. I guess you can call it a drop, but he's late on that one because he takes an extra little hitch and then the ball is kind of high, which makes it a contested catch situation. I know Thielen should catch that ball. He's a professional, but the quarterback needs to throw a ball that makes it easier to catch. But I think you hit it on the head. Like, I think you kind of tamp down on the quick game stuff and you go for the big shots because that's what it's easier to get him a clear throwing window, which I think is when he's at his best, when there's not a defender between him and the receiver. And we saw that on the Jefferson throw you mentioned. You kind of saw it on the Jefferson touchdown throw. And then even on that throw, like, he didn't have the cleanest pocket. And I think that just speaks to his ability of when he could rip a throw, like he can rip a throw better than, or as well as anyone, as well as any young quarterback. But what I saw in the second half, like how the game kind of turned around, it wasn't necessarily McCarthy for me. Cause like you said, like it wasn't that bad in the first half. It was just like what was happening around him. But once they figured out how to run the football and like they went away from the outside zone stuff with Aaron Jones and got to like the duo and like some counter stuff with Jordan Mason, I think that just opened up the game. And you just have to be able to live in that style of offense, which is not rare for a young quarterback. I don't think that's an indictment of who JJ McCarthy is. I think it just speaks to his skill set and what he brings to the table right now and why you draft him first overall. You just have to be able to maintain a running game. It doesn't have to be productive. Like, I think that's where the play action and run and the relationship between the two kind of gets complicated. it's not that you have to run the ball to be able to run play action. It's just that you have to be able to present the threat where the defense has to respect it and has to play the coverages that allow those play action shots to get open. If they're playing like too deep and like, matchy stuff, then you're not getting open on play action. If you're playing base cover 3 because you can't stop the run and you need that extra guy in the box, you don't want them worrying about coverage, then those deep crossers and those outbreakers off play action, they get open. So I think it's just about maintaining that threat. I don't think the run game has to be special. I just think it has to be viable.
And I think it was shown a little bit. I mean, some of these, there's so many different looks at different statistics. And there was one that was quite a while ago that said, well, teams that don't run that successfully still have good play actions. But I also think that you can see it out there from the other team when Jordan Mason rips off a 7-yard run, an 18-yard run, that there's a leaning in sort of factor. If you're a linebacker, if you're a safety, you are not like, oh, this is fine. Especially with the violence in which Jordan Mason runs. Nobody wants to get hit by that at full speed as he's coming into the secondary. And we saw this with Delvin Cook when Gary Kubiak and Kevin Stefanski were here. When you're succeeding, it feels like there's a momentum element to it. The defense starts to get a little anxious, and that's when you take advantage of linebackers and safeties and you can create those windows. I think those plays also really work for the quarterback moving the spot to throw the football. You mentioned some of the balls getting batted down, like getting him on the move a little bit, away from the pressure a little bit. And it's kind of funny because Kevin O'Connell won the Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford in this wide open offense. It was not, run and build off the play action. They just said, Matthew Stafford, you sit in that shotgun and do everything. And then he did that a lot with Kirk Cousins over the first 2 years as well. I mean, those are veteran quarterbacks. This has to be a little bit more of Mike Shanahan, a little bit more of Kyle Shanahan with Brock Purdy, where you are pounding it. And I think what O'Connell maybe realized too is, I have a better interior offensive line than I had before. And I think that they can lean on that run game. He's just got to believe in it. It really comes down to that.
Yeah, and I wonder if the run game, like the base run game, would look better with your left tackle out there. I think like part of the problem with running the outside zone and marrying it with the boot game is like you have a right-handed quarterback, so you want to boot to the right. That means you have to run to the left most of the time if you want to sell the fake. And when you don't have your all-pro left tackle out there, it becomes a problem. And you saw that in this game, like the left tackle position struggled, and they were struggling to get to the second level. Sewell was just making unblocked tackles like at will in the first half. But yeah, I'm with you there. And I just think like, I do think the run game is going to come along, and I think they're going to be able to marry this thing. And I think it's going to look more like the fourth quarter going forward than it is going to look like the first half. I think they just had to work through some stuff. And then now that they know, this is where our bread is going to be buttered, I think they're going to be better for it going forward. And I think we're going to see the JJ that I think I expected to see for the season, the more of the game manager style. And I'm not using that as like a derogatory term. I think that's one of his strengths, and that's one of the reasons you drafted him.
Well, I know. And I made a comparison that nobody likes to hear because Alex Smith never got over the hump and never won the Super Bowl. And if you remember, every year, if you don't win the Super Bowl, you're just the biggest loser of all time and all that sort of stuff. But early Alex Smith with San Francisco made enough plays with his legs, made enough plays in the passing game, wasn't perfectly accurate. They ran the ball well. This defense, as you saw, is pretty darn fantastic. If you play like San Francisco Alex Smith, you're going to win a lot of football games. And I think for him, you can do that while developing along the way to be in a different spot in an ideal world as you go into the playoffs. Now, the Vikings are playing the Atlanta Falcons, another national TV game for JJ McCarthy. Not exactly the Spiro Ditas game on CBS with 3 cameras or whatever. I mean, this is the big stage for him against Michael Penix. Michael Penix was my favorite quarterback coming out. Not, I would have drafted him number 1, but my favorite quarterback to watch. He's so much fun, huge arm, never takes sacks. He just is unafraid to rip it into any window. I am a Penix enjoyer, and so I'm looking forward to this matchup. But Penix versus this defense, I think it should be really, really, really fascinating. What do you think of what you saw from Penix in the first week, now that he's had a full training camp and this is his big sort of second year versus the Brian Flores defense?
I was really impressed with Flores in week 1. Like, if you go back and watch that tape, he was getting rid of the ball quickly, on time, on target. And I think that's the big thing with him is accuracy. I think there's also like the similar question with JJ with like the velocity's there, but what about the touch? And that remains to be seen. I think Atlanta did a really good job of like not forcing him to make touch throws over the second level. So you're going to see a bit of the same on both sides, but I'm really impressed. And I was not like the biggest fan of Penix coming out of the draft. Not that I didn't like him. I was just like, all right, he's an older prospect. He has the knee injuries. He doesn't really move that well, or he doesn't use his mobility. At least I think he ran like a 4.5 at his pro day, but I'm coming around on him. And I think he's one of those guys that can be, if you can give him a clean pocket, I think he's going to cook. I think there's a little bit of Geno in there, where he's going to make the throws. He has a little bit of irrational confidence, but he has the arm strength to back it up. So I'm excited to see those two kind of go head to head. And I think it's a good measuring stick for each guy, like where they're at. But a Flores defense, man, that's quite the test. That's quite the test. So, which is why I thought people were a little harsh on Caleb. Like, I know that there were misses that were like terrible, like 3 of them. But outside of that, I thought he handled the Flores defense as well as you can expect any young quarterback to handle it. And I think we're going to get a different style of quarterback going up against it, one that doesn't move as often, one that maybe is a little more confident in what he's seen and it will pull the trigger quickly. But it's going to be fascinating to see how that works, because I've seen both sides of it. I've seen like Justin Herbert tear up the Flores defense a couple of years ago with just like a laser show all over the field. I'm interested to see if Penix is there and at that level yet. He definitely has the arm strength to kind of replicate that performance, though. I don't know if he has the pocket savvy to do it, though.
Right. The quarterbacks who have given him the most trouble are Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, and that game against Justin Herbert. My goodness. I think Keenan Allen might have had 18 catches in that game, and Herbert was like 40 for 47. I've never seen anything quite like that. But there's something in common with all of those quarterbacks. One, they get rid of the football. And number 2, they are experienced. And that's where Penix coming into US Bank Stadium, I think it's one of the few stadiums remaining in the NFL that has a legitimate impact on the opposing quarterback. And the get off for the edge rushers and the interior players is just different at US Bank Stadium. I looked at this in terms of the gap of sacks at home, sacks away. Pittsburgh had a big gap, and the Vikings were one of the teams that had gaps as well. But Penix is so good at getting rid of the football. Like, what do you think it is about him? Because in college, the guy took a sack like once every 150 snaps or something. What is it about him that allows him to not have those big negative plays?
I think it's the confidence. Like I said, he doesn't really move too much in the pocket, but it's like a Jared Goff situation where like I'm getting rid of the ball on time and I'm going to make a good throw. Like I don't need to really move. And I think there, like we said about JJ's throwing style, there are drawbacks to it. There are upsides to it. And I think we're going to see maybe some of the drawbacks against a chaotic pocket, because Flores is going to be able to create that environment and put that on the quarterback. So I think this is a real test. And I think we're going to see like the true measure, and maybe like the weaknesses we're going to shine a light on them. And I don't want to overreact to it because it is a Flores defense. And I think Atlanta's offensive line is going to be overmatched in this one, but it is an informative and useful thing to watch with a young quarterback. Like it's not going to be linear. He's not just going to have great games every week.
Right. And that's the hard part about this still with these guys, and even with Caleb Williams. Now, I reacted to Caleb Williams' performance just like everyone else, which is that kind of looked the same way that it looked last year. But at the same time, we will talk about, oh, yeah, it clicked for Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen in year 3, but also Monday night tells us every single thing about you, and Sunday night tells us everything about you. As you said, it wouldn't be the NFL if we didn't do it that way. You mentioned fans not being too happy with your Spencer Rattler ranking. What else was stirring the crowds after week 1 with your quarterback article?
I flipped Sam Darnold and Brock Purdy, even though Brock Purdy won. I thought Sam Darnold played an excellent game. I don't know if Vikings fan checked in on their ex-quarterback, but I know he had the fumble at the end. But outside of that, it was like the Sam Darnold we saw last year. They just didn't, pass the football a lot. They ran the foot. It's a Shanahan offense. They're going to run it first, and it didn't really work out. But I thought Darnold played a great game against San Francisco. So that was one. There wasn't too much movement around because it's week 1 and I don't like to overreact. So it was really McCarthy and the 49ers fans, which is nothing new for me. I've been hearing from 49ers fans for a couple years now.
Yeah. Well, the Brock Purdy thing is a curious case because, and now he's hurt, which is going to impact San Francisco quite a bit. It's a curious case because he, I think, has some certain things that JJ McCarthy that we praise him for, command of the offense and decision making and a little baller nature to him. Doesn't have the most impressive physical tools. And we've also seen throughout history that every once in a while, and I'm going to come up with the dumbest reference, like the oldest reference I can, but Washington 1992, or was it 91? 92, 90, 91. So they had this insane offense, and Mark Rippon won the Super Bowl and was just one of the best quarterbacks in the league. The next year, they struggle, and they, I think, barely make the playoffs or miss the playoffs. They had Gary Clark and Art Monk and Ricky Sanders in this innovative offense, and everything just worked for him. And the hardest thing to figure out when we're watching is that one of those things where I should have just used Case Keenum, but for some reason my brain goes to 91 Washington. But like, we've seen this through history, right? Like, no one thought that Case Keenum was going to keep doing what he did, but he played excellent football. I think he was like PFF's 7th highest graded quarterback that year, had good statistics, but sometimes it just comes together for you with San Francisco and Brock Purdy. Now he's hurt. They're in a lot of trouble. I wondered what you thought about the Rams and Matthew Stafford's performance, because when I saw how many points they scored, I was like, oh, that must have been pretty gnarly. And then I looked at how he played. I was like, how did they only score 14 points? Yep. I have had the Rams as one of the teams to watch as far as Super Bowl contenders out of the NFC if Stafford can hold up. What did you think of that game?
If you have an NFL Pro account, like, go and watch Matthew Stafford and watch the end zone. It was insane. Like, especially after everything we've heard about his back during training camp and all that and missing training camp. I had the same question marks. I was like, I don't know about this guy. I kind of dropped him a couple spots in my preseason rankings just because I wasn't sure about what we would see. And now it was old Matthew Stafford again. And I think the thing is, they were playing the Texans defense, which I think is maybe the best defense in the league. I've been joking this week, and I've been like, that 20-point performance translates to 35 points against every other team in the NFL. But he was amazing at it. He would have been my pick for NFC Player of the Week, personally, not to offend Vikings fans further, but it was a great game, and like, just everything you want to see out of a Matthew Stafford game in terms of arm talent and all that. And then on the defense was, and it's like the opposite effect. Like, they're playing the Texans offensive line, so take it with a grain of salt. But Byron Young and Jared Verse, like, those guys look dominant in this game. And I really think the Rams have a chance of winning that division. I was skeptical of them just because of the Matthew Stafford stuff and all the question marks around that. It's easy to forget that, like, back in January, there was trade demands or trade requests and all that. But after 1 week, I might be sold on them.
I think that they are the best coach team in the NFL, and they have the weapons. And if Puka Nacua is healthy, I don't know what you do with him. He's the guy that he's not on video game covers. I never see him in commercials. I never see him in interviews. And yet 10 catches on 11 targets. The Vikings played against them last year and got absolutely shredded by that guy. He is an unstoppable force. And then you add Devontae Adams to that. Like, that's, to me, that's the most complete team. The Vikings are in this conversation is sort of like right behind that, but they've got to prove it. And Stafford has. In the NFC North, let's just touch on those guys, Jared Goff and Jordan Love. Jordan Love didn't have to do a whole lot. Every single wide receiver was wide open. I thought that any quarterback could have had a good game in that game, which made me think that Detroit defensive coordinator is going to have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. So not much in terms of conclusions from Jordan Love. Maybe if you disagree with that, tell me. But Jared Goff, I'd be very worried because his kryptonite was right there on display. And I think everybody is just going to attack that middle all season long. What did you think of those two performances?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on the Love thing. I don't think it was like any new information. It wasn't something that like made me reassess my priors or anything. There were a lot of open throws. I thought he had a couple of impressive like displays of arm talent, but there were a couple of like shaky accuracy passes. So like, yeah, I'm with you there. It didn't move the needle for me. The Jared Goff thing, like I think I saw you tweeted like when the inside of that pocket isn't what it was, like Jared Goff looks normal. And I would totally agree with you. And I think that was the big deal in this game. Like when you watch on the offensive side for Detroit, the offensive line, like it wasn't what it was last year. And it's not just like a pocket protection thing. Like even in the run game, there are a lot of like missed assignments in terms of like who should be blocking who. I know the Packers did a lot to kind of confuse them there, but we didn't see that when Ben Johnson was coordinating the offense. And to your point about the defense, like I thought that was a questionable plan from I think his name's Kelvin Shepard, first year coordinator. It reminded me of the Commanders playoff game where they just kept like sending 5 and 6 man pressures against like, plays that are designed to exploit those exact pressures. And there wasn't an adjustment. I thought that Green Bay had a great plan against the man coverage that you're going to see against the Lions. There was no adjustments there. So I was worried about the Lions coming in because they lost the coordinators, because what happened to their interior offensive line and how that would affect Jared Goff directly. And like after 1 week, I feel pretty smart. I'm patting myself on the back because every problem that you worried about popped up in this game.
Yeah, I think really with Jared Goff, there is a very clear kryptonite for him in his career. The year that they give up on him in Los Angeles, they are one of the worst ranked offensive lines in the league. And then Stafford comes in, they rebuilt it. And I'm sure Goff was like, really? That's the offensive line? But then they build it up in Detroit. And then all of a sudden he's leading the number 1 offense in the NFL, Jared Goff type of player. Okay. As we go forward here, into the future, we haven't resolved everything after week 1 in the National Football League. What excited you to find out in the future about quarterbacks this season that like caught your attention in week 1 and you said, I really want to see how this goes?
I'm going to say Justin Fields. Justin Fields having success with the Jets. And like, I didn't have like eyes directly on that game through when it was on live. And I was just like assuming, it's probably not like I saw the production. I'm like, it's probably a nonsense game. Like we've seen Justin Fields have big games before, but like you go back and watch the tape and just his calm in the pocket. It wasn't great. Like it wasn't like, this is one of the most calm pocket poised quarterbacks in the league, but it was way better than it was in Chicago. And I thought the accuracy was better. I think he's still throwing the ball way too hard at times, especially in quick game, but I'm more interested in like the floor and ceiling debate with quarterback prospects and what gives a guy a high floor and what gives a guy a high ceiling. And my theory has been like, if you have a guy who can run and you could build a run game around him and you get those coverages we were talking about earlier, where it's easier to do the play action stuff and the easy stuff, quote unquote, for quarterbacks, that gives you a pretty high floor rather than like a Mac Jones where you have to run quick game and he's got to be perfect to go on touchdown drives. Those used to be the guys we considered the high floor guys, the pro ready guys. So I really want to see how far the Jets can push this theory. Cause I think Fields, even though like I said, he showed some improvement, he's still like maybe at his best, like the 20th best quarterback in the NFL. But in terms of athleticism and being able to build a run game around a quarterback, I'd say he's top 5. So, and the Jets have the offensive line to take advantage of that. I'm really interested to see how they kind of evolve throughout the season, how the offense evolves, and if defenses catch up to this and like are able to put the clamps down on the run game and what effect that has on the passing game. I think it's a very interesting like testing ground for not only just quarterback development, but like how we should view quarterback prospects and quarterback skill sets.
Yeah, I was watching quite a bit of that game, and I thought, coaching does matter quite a bit. I thought they just nailed it with the right way to manage Justin Fields. Okay, last question. I saved it till last because Vikings fans don't really like hearing this name, but I figured I have to ask what your thought on was. Aaron, the Vikings play him in week 4. Is he back?
Nah, you're fine. Yeah, don't worry about it. Like he was fine. Like I think he had like a 4 ADOT, like a 4-yard ADOT, like a lot of screen passes, maybe the most screen passes in the NFL. He had the Calvin Austin touchdown off play action was very impressive. Like I did not think he had that in his game still. He kind of faded away and it had plenty of zip on it. But watch the pressure dropbacks and it's like, all right, this isn't the guy that he used to be. And that used to be what separated him from, like, he used to be able to do the Tom Brady, Drew Brees, distributor, point guard, run the offense thing. But what separated him was his ability to extend plays and really break a defense's heart after they thought they had the play covered. And that ability is just totally wiped out. And you even saw it in this game. I thought they did a good job. I don't know what to think about the Jets defense, because we thought about the Jets as being like a defensive first team, but like their scheme is totally changing and their defense wasn't very good after Robert Saleh left last year. So like this could just be a situation where he's playing a bad defense and he looks good because of that. But I there's no reason to like readjust what you think of him going forward. I think like it's the Aaron Rodgers you would have expected in the offseason.
I thought that if the Jets made a couple of tackles, it would have been okay. Like they were in the general location of the screens, but a lot of the explosives did come off of plays where Aaron Rodgers didn't do much. At the same time, I kind of thought of Arthur Smith and Ryan Tannehill. Like you got some pretty darn good seasons out of that guy if he could just execute the screens, the play actions to a big hulking wide receiver. So terrified, no, but Rodgers did have a couple of those throws where on the TV it's moving pretty quick. You're like, oh, okay. He can still sling it. Got said a lot by people who wanted Rodgers to play for the Vikings. Last thing for you, who is winning the WNBA finals? I know you are a big W guy. The playoffs are coming up. The Lynx are the number 1 seed. What are we thinking?
I know it doesn't look as good as it did at the beginning of the season, but I'm sticking with the Lynx. Like I'm not buying into the 14-game win streak from the Aces. Like they've looked much better since they made the move, like put Jewel Lloyd on the bench and all that. But I think in a playoff series, they're going to have the better coach. I think they have the best coach in the WNBA, maybe one of the best coaches in basketball, I would say, like regardless of level. Asia Wilson is very tough, but I like that collection of players around Nafisa. I'm going with the Lynx, and I'm pretty confident in it actually, because I just think the Liberty were the one team that I was worried about beating the Lynx, and I just haven't seen it this year. They've gotten a little bit healthier recently, and I don't think they have the defensive just structure to kind of deal with Minnesota for a full series. So yeah, I'm sticking with the Lynx.
Well, and the Lynx have been the number 1 seed for so long. I mean, they're resting Nafisa Collier, they're resting Alana Smith. I mean, it's sort of like a team that goes 14-0. And then you're like, well, what do we do now? Like we've locked up our division, we've locked up our conference. What do we do? Do we rest starters for the last 3 weeks? And I don't think there's been the same intensity, but this team is going to ramp it up when it comes to the playoffs. Very, very excited about that, and excited to see where the quarterback rankings go at the Ringer. Steven Ruiz, great stuff, man. It was great to see you this summer out at camp, and hopefully we get a chance to bump into each other again very soon. Thanks for coming on the show again, man.
Thanks for having me anytime.